In the middle of the room dedicated to concocting pills, there was a rich medicinal smell floating in the atmosphere. There was a cloud of smoke which was filled with a rich and pleasant fragrance that filled the air. In the middle of the room dedicated to concocting pills, there was a rich medicinal smell floating in the atmosphere. There was a cloud of smoke which was filled with a rich and pleasant fragrance that filled the air. Above the gigantic cauldron, the concoction was unceasingly foaming and bubbling. In the cauldron there was an incredible quantity of pills. "Finished," said Lin Feng firmly. An incredible number of small lights immediately rose up in the air, followed by an explosive sound. The atmosphere of that laboratory had once again exploded. Rumbling noises spread in the air. Mr. Qi stopped the fire and wryly smiled at Lin Feng. That guy. He was a monster. Mr. Qi wasn't the only one. Mr. Hua was also fixedly staring at Lin Feng. Lin Feng, who had broken through to the 9th Ling Qi layer, had surprisingly been able to concoct almost 1,000 Ling level pills of medium quality at the same time. In the previous days, Lin Feng had been sticking with the two old men. Through his earth fusion he had learnt a lot from them. They had never given him any instruction, but by being in the room and observing the concoction process, Lin Feng had learnt how to concoct pills and was currently able to concoct Ling-level pills of medium quality on his own. Besides, Lin Feng's concoction speed had also surpassed that of the two old men. At that moment Lin Feng only lacked one thing: fire. He still required Mr. Qi's inner fire to be able to concoct pills. If Lin Feng had been able to control his own form of inner fire, concocting pills would have been even easier for him, and he would also have been quicker. The only thing was preventing Lin Feng from progressing at that moment: fire. Once Lin Feng reached the Xianqi layer, even if he didn't use inner fire, he would at least still be able to condense pure qi into fire, which was also suitable to concoct pills. However, fire made of pure qi would not be as strong as Mr. Hua's inner fire, but would still increase his ability. Lin Feng opened his mouth. He looked satisfied. He finally put these last pills into his Na stone on his ring. They had already finished concocting the 120,000 pills. They only needed to go back to Yangzhou City and they could give them to the soldiers to increase their strength. They would be able to break through to the next layer, which was a monstrous move. A group of cultivators of the 5th Ling Qi layer couldn't compete with a group of cultivators of the 6th Ling Qi layer. The difference was huge. A cultivator of the 6th Ling Qi layer could kill a cultivator of the 5th Ling Qi layer with a single full power strike. These pills would enable 30,000 troops of the 5th Ling Qi layer to break through to the 6th Ling Qi layer. Hearing this would have made many people go insane with fright. Of course, Lin Feng had only been able to achieve this because he had met the two old alchemists. In Xueyu, there were few people above the 3rd Xianqi layer. Besides, cultivators of the 3rd Xianqi layer who were alchemists as well were so rare that it was a miracle to find even one. Mr. Hua, Mr. Qi, thank you very much, said Lin Feng while nodding at the two old men in a very sincere way. There were 90,000 Ling-level pills of medium quality, and 30,000 Ling-level pills of high quality. Exchanging them for purity stones would have enabled the seller to earn a monumental amount of purity stones. Besides, in the laboratory while concocting the pills, Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi had also taught Lin Feng the art of concocting pills, and they had also become able to concoct pills together, which was an extremely rare experience. Experience and knowledge were the most precious things for an alchemist. Mr. Hua shook his head, smiled wryly and said, Lin Feng, if you could control fire, even though the pills you refined are not high-level ones, considering the speed and the quality of the pills, you are much more skilled than both of us old men. I am ashamed. Lin Feng was indeed really gifted at concocting pills. He hadn't never seen anyone concoct pills before. Besides, the strength of his soul was also incredible. It seemed like he could do anything he wished. His soul control was extremely advanced, even if he couldn't rival with the two old men yet in terms of strength. In terms of control, he was better than them. For example, with the way they controlled their souls, they could concoct 100 pills, but there were always some incidents which prevented them from advancing further. But such things couldn't happen to Lin Feng. He could control the entire concoction process very accurately without mistakes. That was amazing. They could almost guess how monstrous Lin Feng's soul control was. You taught me everything, said Lin Feng modestly. All right. You two can stop exchanging compliments. We still have a long way before being able to concoct divine waters pills. None of us is able to concoct them. said Mr. Qi, interrupting Mr. Hua and Lin Feng. He pulled them back to reality when he said that. Indeed, they still had to progress a lot to make divine waters pills. Even with 3 cultivators in harmony, they still had a long way before being able to concoct them. In the coming weeks, we should stay here and concoct pills. We should also be discreet. We don't know what's happening out there, said Mr. Qi in a low voice. Immediately after, the 3 of them left the concoction room and arrived in a huge living room. At that moment, in the distance, a silhouette flickered. When Lin Feng saw the person, lights flashed in his eyes. Lin Feng had finally left the concoction room. During that short time, everything had turned upside down, but Lin Feng and the 2 old men knew nothing about it. Ba Dao, you arrived at the perfect moment, said Lin Feng. How is it outside? Ba Dao remained silent for a moment and then said only one word: chaos. These days in Celestial River, there are many strong cultivators. They all belong to the greatest influence spheres of the country. There are also some absolutely unknown people who, when they heard the news, immediately came to Celestial River. They are alone between 2 influential groups. What 2 influential groups? Asked Lin Feng. One of these groups, you know it, it's the Dream Pavilion. The Dream Pavilion seems to be a small part of a larger organization. The cultivator of the 3rd Xianqi layer last time was only in charge in Celestial River. Lin Feng was stupefied. A small part? Lin Feng suddenly remembered what Lan Jiao had told him on that night. She belonged to a very influential group, but back then, Lin Feng hadn't paid attention to that. It seemed like Lan Jiao hadn't lied. What is the other one? The other one is evil. They don't ride horses, they fly through the air in coffins. Even though they are not mounted, they are extremely strong. Besides, their skills resemble those of Emotsong Lan. They can consume other people's pure qi and flesh. They probably are the same kind of cultivators as Emotsong Lan. In Celestial River, a myriad of people have already been killed because of them, said Ba Dao. Like Emotsong Lan. Lin Feng frowned. He was feeling a bit annoyed. Aunt Yun belonged to one of these influential forces. Besides, the other sphere of influence works with Motsong Lan. They all hated Lin Feng from the bottom of their heart. If both these groups attacked Lin Feng, the situation would be troublesome. Apart from these 2 spheres of influence, there are many other strong cultivators from Shuiyu. For example, every single person belonging to the Luoxia sect has come, even their patriarch Gu Chunqiu. Besides, there are also people from the Haoyu sect, the Ice and Snow Mountain village, the Wanshou sect, the Yu clan, and even some people from the Imperial clan. They are all here in Celestial River. It is encircled by strong cultivators. That heavenly dragon cauldron has led to such an unstable situation. It seems like while we were concocting pills, it became chaotic outside, said Mr. Qi indifferently. Everybody wanted to steal the treasure. Yes. Because of the ancient cauldron, many horrible things happened. Many strong cultivators even died. They want to end the conflict in 3 days, said Ba Dao. End the conflict? What does that mean? Asked Lin Feng, perplexed. I don't know who decided it. There is a rumor in Celestial River that everybody gathered outside of Celestial River to solve the issue and decide to whom the ancient cauldron would belong. That suggestion, according to the rumors, also received the approval of the majority. How will they agree on a specific person? Asked Lin Feng. They still haven't chosen yet. The rumor spread quickly, and it is that the treasure is already in the hands of the people with the coffins. If they don't understand that, everybody in Celestial River will kill them and then go with the plan everybody agreed upon. Everybody agreed on this course of action. How smart is the person at the origin of all of this? Thought Lin Feng. Those who hadn't received the treasure would of course agree. Before, everybody just had malicious intentions and would have never thought of such a thing, but that move, even though it seemed simple, was actually very smart. The person who had spread the rumor had managed to make everybody agree on a solution. Celestial River suddenly became extremely calm, but that calmness was oppressive. It was clear to everybody it was an indication of the coming storm. Celestial River suddenly became extremely calm, but that calmness was oppressive. It was clear to everybody it was an indication of the coming storm. At that moment, everybody was calmly staring at the mystical and extremely strong cultivators in their coffins. If they didn't accept the offer, the crowd would definitely attack them. Even though these people were extremely strong, in the middle of all these influential groups, nobody dared make a strange move. 2 days later at night, that situation reached its breaking point. In the vast ancient city, in the middle of that night, the main street was almost completely depopulated. Extremely few people were to be seen. At the city, there were many people calmly waiting. In the middle of that crowd, there was one silhouette. That person was wearing a black chong pao. That person was covered from head to toe in black to the extent that their face was also covered. That person's eyes were firmly closed as if they were sound asleep, but that person already knew that every single thing around them, including the slightest grain of sand, was under their control. In the earth fusion state, he could perceive everything clearly. It even seemed like the atmosphere around the city gate belonged to his world. That black silhouette was precisely Lin Feng. He had meticulously disguised himself. In Lin Feng's mind appeared many silhouettes. They were coming towards the city gate, and there were more and more people joining them. There were a few very strong cultivators, who, when they arrived near the city gate, started walking softly and lightly, almost completely silently. It was difficult to notice them, but nothing could escape from Lin Feng's earth fusion. If someone came, Lin Feng was already well aware of their every movement. At that moment in the horizon, a silhouette wearing a snowy white chong pao appeared in Lin Feng's vision, which made him frown. A sword appeared, and it seemed like a powerful energy was being released. He's finally here, thought Lin Feng with a cold expression on the corner of his mouth. Immediately after, he slowly opened his eyes, which revealed an endless fierceness. Bing Hetung's mood was bad these days. As a great elder of the Ice and Snow Mountain village, he had brought many people from the sect to Celestial River with the objective to kill Lin Feng, and in the end, apart from him, everybody was killed. After that, the heavenly dragon cauldron had appeared and everybody had started fighting for it, including Bing Hetung. He hadn't notified anyone at his sect because he wanted to keep the cauldron for himself. Bing Hetung had been closely following Emotsong Lan and had almost obtained the ancient cauldron, but in the end, he had lost each time. Then, the group of mysterious and extremely strong cultivators had come and Emotsong Lan gave the ancient cauldron to them. Bing Hetung's heart was becoming colder and colder, filled with evilness. He couldn't go back to the sect. He had no choice but to continue hoping for an opportunity to steal the ancient cauldron. Therefore, he had made his move early. As expected, Bing Hetung's instincts were correct. Many people had already gathered there, and besides, there were lots of cultivators of the Xianqi layer. Before, cultivators of the Xianqi layer were all considered as extremely powerful, but at that moment, there were so many gathered in one place. They were all there for the ancient cauldron. A bunch of crappy cultivators, they also want the ancient cauldron, thought Bing Hetung while smiling coldly. That place was filled with extremely strong cultivators. Even cultivators of the first and second Xianqi layers could only watch. If they tried to get involved, they would certainly lose their life. In the continent, each time a treasure appeared, a large number of people died, but each time, there were people who courted death. At that moment, a cold energy caressed Bing Hetung's body, but there was a flash of sword chi as well, which made his face turn rigid. "Who's that?" he said in a small voice. Immediately after, Bing Hetung saw a black silhouette flicker. The silhouette left the area of the city gate at full speed and started to rush towards the distance. Huh. Bing Hetung frowned. What a strong presence. He was surprised. That was Lin Feng, that bastard. There is only one person who wants to die that much. Bing Hetung rushed towards Lin Feng. He wasn't worried about attacking Lin Feng with his cultivation level. Even if there was Meng Qing and Mr. Hua, it didn't matter. Even though he couldn't defeat them, retreating wouldn't be a problem either. "Stay there," shouted Bing Hetung coldly. He then threw himself in the air towards Lin Feng at an incredible speed. However, Lin Feng was escaping at full speed as well. In a flash, he had already crossed a distance of a few kilometers. He had flown through the air like a gust of wind, but the gap between a cultivator of the Ling Qi layer and a cultivator of the third Xian Qi layer was gigantic. In a very short time, he had caught up with Lin Feng. Ice Chi shot towards Lin Feng, which made him shiver and slightly move back. He remained silent, but his eyes were still ice cold. Bing Hetung, as expected, was chasing him. Boom! A punch emerged from Bing Hetung's side and bombarded the atmosphere towards Lin Feng. A heavy frozen air invaded the atmosphere. A snowy white layer of ice had invaded the darkness of the night. However, Lin Feng suddenly changed direction, looked behind him at the attack, and in a flash dodged the attack. His back could feel the cold energy contained within that attack. Lin Feng finally came to a stop and landed steadily on the ground. Bing Hetung was coldly staring at him. At that moment, Lin Feng opened his Chong Pao, raised his head and looked at Bing Hetung. There was a cold smile on the corner of his lips. Bing Hetung, today is your day of judgment, said Lin Feng. At that moment, two silhouettes appeared in the air. One was following behind the other. In a flash, the two silhouettes blocked Bing Hetung's path of retreat. These two silhouettes were, of course, Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi at the same time. Another silhouette appeared by Lin Feng's side, Meng Qing. Initially, he had come to the Celestial River City Gate with the purpose of neutralizing Mo Tsonglan and Bing Hetung. Day of Judgment? Unlikely, said Bing Hetung while making a motion of retreat. He released a punch made of pure qi which directly moved towards Mr. Qi. Surprisingly, he was considering Mr. Qi as the weak link. Lin Feng and the others smiled coldly, and immediately after, they saw Mr. Qi raise his hand, out of which an incredibly gigantic bright red light emerged. Mr. Qi's hand was filled with a violent and brutal qi boom. A monstrously powerful energy spread in the atmosphere. At the moment when Mr. Qi's attack reached Bing Hetung, and with an explosive collision, blood started to flow from Bing Hetung's mouth. Using all of his power, Bing Hetung quickly moved back. His facial expression had changed drastically. That red-haired old man, who was not there last time, was at the fourth Xian Qi layer. He had chosen him because Mr. Qi was blocking the path in the encirclement, which was the best choice for escape, but in the end the person blocking him turned out to be at the fourth Xian Qi layer. When had Lin Feng got to know such a strong cultivator? Kill him, said Lin Feng coldly, which made Bing Hetung's heart start pounding. Immediately after, Mr. Qi's silhouette flickered and he rushed through the air. A monstrously terrifying oppressive energy crashed onto Bing Hetung's body. His silhouette flickered. He wanted to dodge, but at the same time, a burning energy was rushing towards his back. Frozen world! Shouted Bing Hetung furiously. The level of his technique was extremely advanced. It was already heavily snowing in the area. Boom! A small hand appeared and smashed into Bing Hetung's body. It was Meng Qing. She wasn't scared of the cold. In a flash, she had broken through Bing Hetung's technique, immediately punching him. Die! Shouted Mr. Hua. Fireballs rushed towards Bing Hetung like meteors falling from the sky. Bing Hetung gnashed his teeth and tried to dodge the incoming attack. However, another punch crashed into his body again. This punch contained fire, which made Bing Hetung groan and fall from the air and land heavily onto the ground. The atmosphere was shaking. Bing Hetung's internal organs had been damaged by the punch. He lowered his head and lightly coughed. His chest was extremely painful. At that moment, a sword had pierced straight through his chest. The sword was stabbed through his back, and the tip was sticking out the front of his chest. Bing Hetung turned his head and looked at Lin Feng. He had the impression that it must be an illusion. He was going to die. He had a great status within his sect. He was a great elder. He was both extremely strong and influential. However, at that moment he had been killed by Lin Feng's sword. If you want to kill me or any of my people, you will die, said Lin Feng, sounding ice cold. His long sword flashed with an intense sword qi, and in a flash, Bing Hetung's internal organs were destroyed. A powerful cultivator of the third Xian Qi layer was defeated. He had died. Bing Hetung had never thought that he would die in Celestial River. Besides, it hadn't happened when trying to steal the ancient cauldron. Instead, Lin Feng had lured him into a trap. He had died. Bing Hetung had never thought that he would die in Celestial River. Besides, it hadn't happened when trying to steal the ancient cauldron. Instead, Lin Feng had lured him into a trap. For strong cultivators had attacked at the same time. Even if Bing Hetung was extremely strong, it was easy to kill him with a group. Besides, they hadn't randomly attacked Bing Hetung. They had carefully planned the ambush. Lin Feng looked at Bing Hetung's corpse and grabbed his Na ring. He immediately stored it in his own Na stone. Considering he had the amazing status of Great Elder at the Ice and Snow Mountain Village, He probably had accumulated an incredible amount of resources during his long life, including some family heirlooms. Besides, Ba Dao had picked up a lot of rings containing Na stones from the other battles and gave them to Lin Feng. They all belonged to cultivators of the Xianqi layer in the past. Lin Feng had become quite wealthy already. Let's go. Lin Feng's silhouette flickered and he moved towards the Celestial River City Gate. A short time after, he was in position again. Lin Feng jumped onto the gigantic wall. His back was leaning against a pillar. Lin Feng then slightly closed his eyes and had the feeling of becoming one with the night. In his mind, a few silhouettes suddenly appeared. They were absolutely silent and were not giving off any presence. They couldn't escape from Lin Feng's vision when he was in fusion with the earth itself. Unless they managed to thoroughly hide their qi, Lin Feng could always detect them without being seen at all. Many strong cultivators had already arrived. Besides, they remained in dark places and didn't show themselves. In the east, a streak of light signaled that dawn was approaching, gradually breaking through the darkness of the night. The dark blue sky was starting to reveal itself. At that moment, Lin Feng frowned. A brutal qi appeared and pressed against his body. How cold! A group of black coffins silently appeared in the sky. Their evil and demonic qi streaked through the sky as they moved. They were both silent and terrifying. These coffins were already flying low in the sky so the crowd could see them. People in the crowd felt extremely cold. 13 coffins. Many people in Celestial River could see the coffins. They were stupefied. Were these 13 coffins the representatives of the powerful evil cultivators? Behind the 13 coffins, many silhouettes were flickering and closely following the 13 coffins. All of these people's qi seemed extremely strong. These people belonged to the strongest spheres of influence. They were obviously not going to let the people in coffins, who had also managed to obtain the heavenly dragon cauldron, leave peacefully. Outside of Celestial River, on the yellow sand, many cultivators were already waiting. They looked cold and detached. These people were all extremely strong and intended to block the people with the coffins. Amongst these coffins which streaked through the sky, there was one to the side which directly moved near Lin Feng. Lin Feng could thus feel even more distinctly the terrifying qi. Lin Feng was wondering what kind of person practiced such evil skills. Zerr. Silently, the coffins opened themselves. 2 black chains appeared and immediately moved towards Lin Feng. They moved extremely quickly. Lin Feng was stupefied. When the chains appeared, Lin Feng had a strange feeling as if he was being sucked towards the chains, but he resisted. A strange sound emerged from the coffin. The black chains seemed to have found their target. They transformed into 2 dark lights which appeared in front of Lin Feng. Dodge! Lin Feng was in fusion with the earth. At that moment, Lin Feng was gracefully moving back and forth while carefully avoiding the attacks of the chains. The dark lights from the chains suddenly passed in front of him, so close that they almost crashed into his body. Even though he hadn't been touched by the dark lights, Lin Feng could still feel the evil qi that created the light penetrate into his body. Block! An evil voice emerged from the coffin. The black chains changed direction, but Lin Feng, high up in the air, even though he couldn't fully use his earth fusion, he released a huge amount of purple energy. His body suddenly rushed through the sky like a meteor. He wasn't retreating, in fact, he had just thrown himself towards the coffin. He was monstrously quick and the black chains failed to block his path. What amazing agility! Thought many people when they saw Lin Feng rushing through the sky. Lin Feng hadn't broken through to the Xianqi layer, but he had been able to dodge the black chains consecutively, which already showed that he was extremely skilled. Besides, at the crucial moment, he hadn't tried to escape. On the contrary, he had chosen to attack. A light flashed and a spiritual weapon materialized in Lin Feng's hand. It was a long sword. It looked swift and fierce. Die! Shouted Lin Feng. His sword slashed through the sky towards the coffin. Cling, cling, cling. An endless amount of chains rushed forth from the coffin and collided with Lin Feng's sword qi. People's hearts were pounding. The light from the sword qi lasted for a moment and then the sword qi vanished without a trace. That cultivator in the coffin was much stronger than Lin Feng. It seemed like there was an endless ocean of black chains, and they were all now rushing towards Lin Feng at full speed. Besides, the sky seemed to turn black from the endless black chains that appeared. The other companions of the cultivator in the coffin were already in the distance. In a flash, the coffin started burning. Just after the powerful ice attack, Mr. Hu carried out another powerful fire attack. That black coffin suddenly looked magnificent. The fire was burning on one side and the ice on the other side was reflecting the brilliance of the fire. Ah! A scream came from the coffin. The myriad of chains rushed back to the coffin and emitted loud sounds when they collided with the coffin. The coffin exploded and a silhouette appeared before the eyes of the crowd. The hideous silhouette of a man who looked like a skeleton appeared. He was hanging in the air thanks to the chains. He looked like a monster. However, he was severely suffering from the effects of the ice chi and fire chi corroding his body. Ice and fire had mixed together. Ice chi and fire chi together made a terrifyingly deadly power. "I will kill you," shouted the monster evilly. He raised his head to look at Lin Feng, but then immediately after, a cold light plummeted from the heavens and pierced through his head. The atmosphere became deadly silent. Amongst the cultivators inside the coffins, the first one had died. When the crowd saw that corpse, they sighed. Why had the strong cultivator in the coffin used his chains to attack Lin Feng? He hadn't managed to immobilize Lin Feng. In the end, he had lost his life because of it. At the moment just before he died, his heart was probably filled with regrets. He had provoked Lin Feng and the punishment had been his life. When the crowd saw that corpse, they sighed. Why had the strong cultivator in the coffin used his chains to attack Lin Feng? He hadn't managed to immobilize Lin Feng. In the end, he had lost his life because of it. At the moment just before he died, his heart was probably filled with regrets. He had provoked Lin Feng and the punishment had been his life. Besides, at the moment when Lin Feng used his sword, it seemed like he had become stronger once again and broken through to the 9th Ling Qi layer. On the path of cultivation, he was advancing at lightning speed. He is a real genius, he's really extraordinary, thought the crowd. Lin Feng was monstrous. Within a few days he had broken through to the next Ling Qi layer. Besides, at the time when Lin Feng was still in the 8th Ling Qi layer, he was able to kill cultivators of the Xian Qi layer. So now that he became stronger, maybe that cultivator of the first Xian Qi layer would no longer be his equal. But at the same time, a myriad of cold and deadly energies were surrounding Lin Feng, which made his heart grow cold. A huge number of people wanted to kill Lin Feng. Concerning the 12 other coffins, they were all floating above the yellow sand. They were, as before, silent, which made the crowd feel horribly oppressed. The unknown was the most frightening thing in the world. Besides, the person whom Lin Feng had just killed was also terrifying. His body was entirely covered with black chains, which gave off the impression that he was a demon. He looked extremely evil. At that moment, many people started walking forwards and arrived in front of the people in their coffins. Each and every single one of them looked cold and detached. In that group of people there was the leader of the Dream Pavilion, Aunt Yun, who had fought against Mr. Hua and Meng Qing. At that moment, she was behind a middle-aged man. That man had an even higher status than her. The 13 evil ectoplasms, you surprisingly rushed over to Celestial River, but this is Shuiyu. You shouldn't be here, said the middle-aged man while looking at the 12 coffins in a cold and detached manner. At the same time, he had immediately revealed their social status as the 13 evil ectoplasms. However, many people looked puzzled. They had never heard that name, the 13 evil ectoplasms. Oh. Some sharp whistling sounds spread through the atmosphere. The coffins were moving towards that middle-aged man at the speed of light. But the man who had just talked looked calm and serene and remained motionless. His heart was filled with endless coldness again. Oh my God! The Dream Pavilion is a branch of the Cosmic Pavilion, shouted a person in the crowd in surprise. You people are from the Dragon Mountain Empire, said the person again whose pupils shrank while staring at the middle-aged man. Surprisingly, you have some knowledge. You are not as moronic as him, said the man mockingly. Obviously, he was making fun of Lin Feng. The Cosmic Pavilion is one of the largest powers of the Dragon Mountain Empire. We have branches everywhere. The Dream Pavilion is just one of them, that's all. You are just a bunch of nobodies compared to us. Even the Shuiyu Imperial clan are just a bunch of nobodies to us. As far as the Tiansha sect is concerned, They are one of the biggest sects of the Black Feather Empire. You can't afford to provoke them, therefore everybody, get the hell out of here," said the middle-aged man, sounding insufferably arrogant. He gave the impression that he thought that he was a god when in the Shuiyu country, considering everything and everyone beneath him. Many people could feel his arrogance and thought that it was natural. Amazingly, they were people from the Cosmic Pavilion from the Dragon Mountain Empire. In Shuiyu there were 13 powers, 4 of them were the empires while 9 of them were normal countries. The Dragon Mountain Empire was one of the 4 empires. However, Shuiyu was just a small country, dependent on the Dragon Mountain Empire. The Cosmic Pavilion was one of the biggest spheres of influence in the empire. Everybody could imagine how strong they were. No wonder that the middle-aged man was so arrogant. Besides, the Black Feather Empire was also one of the 4 great empires. They were as strong as the Dragon Mountain Empire. The people in the coffin surprisingly were extremely strong cultivators from the Black Feather Empire, and belonged to the Tian Sha sect. Many people were starting to move back. These cultivators were from 2 of the 4 empires. They were way too strong. Nobody could afford provoking them. "Weaklings," said a voice sounding cold and detached. Everybody was stupefied and then immediately looked at Lin Feng. "Weaklings, because of one sentence you are all scared to death and start moving back. Are the sects of all the imperial countries extremely strong? Don't they have weak sects as well? Besides, even if their sects are extremely strong, so what? This is not within their sect, this is Shuiyu. You people are scared of a sect which is in a faraway corner of the continent. What's the point in such weaklings being cultivators?" said Lin Feng, sounding cold and detached. The crowd was shocked. Lin Feng was right. They were in Shuiyu, which is where their sects had power. If the people in front of them stole the treasure and left, who would be able to find it in the gigantic continent of 9 clouds? But they were all terrified. What kind of cultivators were they against? When Lin Feng thought about that, he looked at the middle-aged man of the Cosmic Pavilion. Lights were flashing in Lin Feng's eyes. That middle-aged man was so sly. He surprisingly was trying to scare everybody away so that he would be able to get the cauldron for himself. "Trash is trash," said the middle-aged man while smiling coldly. He stopped looking at the crowd and then looked at Lin Feng in a strange way. What a brilliant young man. He knew that the middle-aged man wanted to focus his energy on killing him, which was why he wanted to scare the crowd away without a fight. If all those interested in the ancient cauldron had left, it would have been very dangerous for Lin Feng. Lin Feng had a different line of thought. If the crowd left, would he still be able to grab the ancient cauldron in the chaos? Of course it would have been impossible. He was facing the Cosmic Pavilion and the Tian Sha sect. "Stop your arguing," said an abyssal voice at that moment. It amazingly came from one of the people from the 13 evil ectoplasms. "Today all of you will die," said a somber voice. The 13 evil ectoplasms people started releasing their evil chi. In the air, the broken coffins turned into a gray chi which started to gather around the cultivators. It was extremely cold and sinister. The gray chi was getting more and more dense and was vast above the yellow sand. People were suddenly breathless. They saw that the gray chi which was condensing was gradually transforming into a silhouette, shaped like a person. When the 12 members of the 13 evil ectoplasms saw the silhouette slowly form itself above the ground, they respectfully said, "We welcome a king-class evil ectoplasm." When the 12 members of the 13 evil ectoplasms saw the silhouette slowly form itself above the ground, they respectfully said, "We welcome a king-class evil ectoplasm." "A king-class evil ectoplasm is here. How is that possible?" thought the middle-aged man while frowning. The people of the Tian Sha sect were extremely strict. Besides, the 13 evil ectoplasms were all above the Xianqi layer. They were extremely strong. The 13 evil ectoplasms were just stationed in Shuiyu. Even though they weren't as strong as the other evil ectoplasms in Black Feather, they were still all at or above the second Xianqi layer. As far as the king class was concerned in Black Feather, in order to be an authentic king class, a cultivator had to be at the Tianqi layer. At that moment, the 13 evil ectoplasms were kneeling down in front of their king. As expected, the corpse which had appeared was at the Tianqi layer. He had monstrous power and could even destroy the whole country. The people of the Tian Sha sect are so quick, the middle-aged man said while narrowing his eyes. He was blankly staring at the corpse which had appeared. He was no longer feeling at ease. Besides, at that moment the evil chi finished transforming into a silhouette. Surprisingly, that silhouette was crawling on the ground. The person raised their head and immediately stood up, tall and erect. But that body looked like a gray illusion. Besides, it had 2 black holes instead of eyes. It looked terrifying. They are still convinced that we, people of the Tian Sha sect, accepted the meeting here because we were scared, haha. Laughed a deep and evil voice. It was coming from the gray silhouette. It looked like an illusion, but his voice sounded very clear and distinct, clearly affecting the other cultivators. We've come here to kill, said the king-class evil ectoplasm. The 12 other evil ectoplasms all stood up, and an endless amount of chains started to fill the atmosphere. In a flash, many people who didn't have the time to dodge were tied up in chains. All these people immediately got pulled towards the king. An evil smile appeared on the king's mouth. His silhouette flickered and he immediately rushed forward. Ah! A blood-curdling scream spread through the atmosphere. The king-class ectoplasms had jumped on that person and sucked all of his pure chi as well as his blood from his body, until there was nothing left at all. In a flash, that person had turned into a pile of skin and bones. Besides, the image of the king was becoming more lifelike. Horrible shrieks were spreading through the atmosphere. All the people who were tied up in chains had their blood and pure chi sucked from them. Besides, the king's illusion was getting even more real. Some evil chi spread in the atmosphere. He is reincarnating into a new body. The middle-aged man's pupils shrank. He had suddenly understood. No wonder the king had made it to Celestial River so quickly. Stop him. We can't afford to let him regain his body. Right now he's just a spirit, he's not very strong, but if we give him the opportunity to absorb more blood and pure chi, then he will regain a real body, become a real king class and have the strength at the Tian Chi layer. If that happens, everybody here will die, said the leader of the Cosmic Pavilion, which made people's hearts start pounding. If he regained a real body, he would be at the Tian Chi layer? If that happened, they would all definitely die. There wouldn't be a single one left. When Lin Feng heard that, he secretly smiled coldly. That guy had just told the entire crowd to screw off, and now that the king class was regaining a real body, he had suddenly drastically changed. He wanted everybody to stay and help stop the king. Why wasn't he going himself? Back, said Lin Feng. He immediately moved back. If the king-class evil ectoplasm had a chance of regaining his strength, Lin Feng preferred leaving. Losing his life because of the heavenly dragon cauldron was really not worth it. The 12 evil ectoplasms were attacking at the same time. It seemed like their chains were endless, and that their power was inexhaustible. People were unceasingly being tied up in chains, then dragged towards the king, and then had their pure chi and blood were sucked from their body. Don't think that you can run away. If the king regains a real body as well as his strength of the Tian Chi layer, do you think that you will be able to run away? Now the only solution is to kill the 12 remaining from the 13 evil ectoplasms, and then immobilize the king. This is the only way for us not to die and even get the heavenly dragon cauldron, shouted the middle-aged man from the Cosmic Pavilion loudly. His voice was violently resonating in people's minds. It also seemed like he was, at that moment, realizing that the crowd was adopting a wait-and-see attitude. If he didn't attack first, there would probably be nobody who would dare to take the initiative. "Thousand Fist Shadows!" shouted the man. His body moved swiftly and violently bombarded the atmosphere with his fist, which made the entire atmosphere vibrate. A golden pure chi transformed into a gigantic hand and rushed through the air towards the evil ectoplasms. Boom! The pure chi was striking against the chains, making them vibrate violently and move back. One of the evil ectoplasms, who was too weak, surprisingly couldn't stand the power from the pure chi, and his body was sent flying backwards. The middle-aged man of the Cosmic Pavilion had broken through to the 5th Xian Chi layer. He was extremely strong. The Cosmic Pavilion had also dispatched some strong cultivators for the heavenly dragon cauldron. Die! An incredibly sharp energy emerged. A long spear, which looked like a venomous dragon, rushed forwards. It immediately moved towards the evil ectoplasm's chest, who had been knocked back. Another one of them had just died. When the crowd saw that move, the crowd suddenly felt less scared. Indeed, these evil ectoplasms weren't that strong at all. The evil ectoplasms were only in a small group. If the large group of cultivators all attacked together, how could these evil ectoplasms overpower them? As far as the king was concerned, if they prevented him from absorbing more pure qi and blood, it wouldn't be easy for him to become stronger by himself. Kill them. Then we will be able to take back the heavenly dragon cauldron. These people are only at the Qianqi layer like us. Why are you scared? Shouted the cultivator who had just thrown the spear. He looked majestic and his voice was filled with power. Yes, kill them. There are only 11 evil ectoplasms left, that's all. The king cannot do anything. Let's kill them and take back the heavenly dragon cauldron, said another powerful voice which made people's hearts beat faster. They were starting to feel a rush of fighting spirit. Kill them. Get the ancient cauldron. Kill them. If the king becomes stronger, he will kill us all even though we are so many people. Many people were saying various things as if they were trying to regain their motivation, and speaking like the heavenly dragon cauldron was about to be theirs. You all want to die, said the king-class evil ectoplasm. When he saw that these people wanted to kill him, he released some cold and evil qi. His body shook and he grabbed 2 evil ectoplasms. 2 horrible shrieks spread through the air and in a flash, the 2 evil ectoplasms fell dead onto the ground. When the other evil ectoplasms saw that, their eyes narrowed. Expressions of terror appeared on their faces. The king-class evil ectoplasm was planning on absorbing their blood and qi. You give me your lives, said the king-class evil ectoplasm. His silhouette transformed into a gray light and streaked through the air towards the evil ectoplasms. All of them were already tied by their own chains, and the chains obeyed the king-class. At that moment the crowd was attacking and was about to reach them. The king-class evil ectoplasm jumped high into the air. It was amazing. In a flash the king was high in the sky. In the atmosphere, the evil ectoplasms were tied up by their own chains. An incredible quantity of pure qi and blood was flowing along these chains and entering the king's body. The king's body looked even more real. His face looked like he was intoxicated with happiness. He had sucked up the pure qi and blood of 10 cultivators of the Qianqi layer. He was demonic. When the crowd saw that evil monster in the air, their hearts were pounding. Was the king-class evil ectoplasm really going to obtain a real body? Would they all die? Shouted the king furiously. The infinity of chains were swinging in the atmosphere. The 13 evil ectoplasms had all died. Only the king-class remained, looking majestic in the sky. You will all die. I will suck up all your blood and qi, said the king while looking down at the people on the ground. His mouth looked hideous and evil. How strong the king-class evil ectoplasm will become real. When the king appears, we will all die. Everybody was panic-stricken. Lin Feng was quickly moving back. He had anticipated such incidents occurring. Not only had the Cosmic Pavilion appeared but the Tian Sha sect of the Black Feather Empire. Even the king-class evil ectoplasm had appeared. Lin Feng had never heard about these 2 spheres of influence from these 2 different empires. However, at the moment when Lin Feng was leaving, a sharp qi emerged. Lin Feng turned around and saw a person who was preventing him from leaving. Lin Feng was also dumbstruck. That person was the strong cultivator who, a moment ago, had killed the evil ectoplasm with his spear, the one who had been trying to convince everybody to fight against the king class. Lin Feng was fixedly staring at his interlocutor. Lin Feng's eyes were filled with displeasure. Lin Feng was fixedly staring at his interlocutor. Lin Feng's eyes were filled with displeasure. That man had killed an evil ectoplasm with a spear, motivated the crowd to fight against the king, but he was already there and not fighting. Besides, he was even preventing him from leaving. Lin Feng glanced around him and his heart twitched for a second. At that moment, there wasn't only the spear cultivator standing around Lin Feng but 7 others as well. They were all wearing black clothes and all had spears in their hands. Even though they weren't releasing any qi, their silence and coldness were piercing to the bones, which made Lin Feng sense that these 8 people were all extremely strong cultivators. Let him go. At that moment, a faint yet firm discernible voice spread through the air. Immediately after, the one who were blocking Lin Feng's way looked at Lin Feng in a respectful way and opened the way, letting Lin Feng leave. Lin Feng stared straight into the first person's eyes. Then he looked towards Celestial River. On the city gate, there was a person wearing a black chong pao. His body and face was completely covered. He looked mystical and mysterious. At that moment, the person who spoke was calmly leaning against the city wall and lowered his head, almost looking like he was closing his eyes, as if what was happening at that moment had nothing to do with him. By carefully observing that man in a black chong pao, Lin Feng realized that the situation was much more complex than he initially believed. Maybe that king class was an insect to him. Everyone had come for the cauldron, but there was a venomous snake staring at everyone like they were prey. Of course, he was also looking for the heavenly dragon cauldron. Lin Feng continued walking on the periphery, but didn't hurry to leave. He was standing on the yellow sand watching the people fighting. At that moment, they only saw the king-class body fly through the air and rush towards a small group. Immediately, the small group of cultivators died after having their qi and blood absorbed. We must kill him. If he regains his body, it will be very dangerous, whereas right now we are dealing with his spirit and nothing more. I am sure that if we attack him together, we will definitely kill him, shouted the middle-aged man of the cosmic pavilion when he noticed that the crowd was becoming distracted and easy targets. However, when he finished talking, he saw a pair of piercingly cold eyes looking at him. They were piercing him to the bones, making his heartbeat accelerate. Die! Shouted the king-class evil ectoplasm furiously. An endless number of chains started moving towards him, making his heart pound brutally. He jumped and a brutal fist moved towards the chain. The pure qi of the fist attack emitted rumbling noises in the atmosphere. However, at that moment many chains silently appeared behind him. In a flash he turned his head around and his facial expression drastically changed. He couldn't avoid them anymore, it was too late. These chains were controlled by the king's soul. They were moving closer and closer to him, when suddenly, both his hands were tied up by the chains. I don't want to die, attack him together. The middle-aged man furiously shouted, but at that moment the crowd was dumbstruck. They only saw an evil smile appear on the king's face, before he then threw himself forwards like a predator. You've become my dinner, the king-class evil ectoplasm evilly said. He landed on the middle-aged man's body and sucked out his pure qi and blood. Thousand illusion disintegration. The middle-aged man furiously shouted. A deadly strength invaded the atmosphere. The king-class evil ectoplasm suddenly looked surprised and was blown backwards. Boom! A multitude of chains were broken. At the same time, the middle-aged man's body also disappeared like dust in the wind. The king was startled. His qi was fluctuating, which meant that he had been injured. Thousand illusion disintegration. What a bastard! Arr! The king groaned and continued to move while sucking out the qi and blood from the people he encountered. At that moment there weren't that many strong cultivators left. In a flash there were only a few dozen people left. Besides, the king's qi was getting more and more powerful. Run away! Run away! The crowd only had one thought. Everyone started trying to escape in every direction. They didn't want the heavenly dragon cauldron anymore. At that moment, a few silhouettes were running towards Lin Feng. However, the cultivator who blocked Lin Feng's escape a moment ago, the one with the spear, was still standing there, as motionless as a mountain, as steady as a rock. He looked cold and detached, and his eyes looked sharp. Open the way! Shouted a man while running away like a madman. The spear in the cultivator's hand shook and in a flash, some black pure qi appeared and transformed into a long dragon which immediately shot towards the man who was trying to run away. In an instant, that cultivator of the Xian Qi layer had died. How strong! That spear is monstrously powerful. He is at least as strong as Mr. Qi, thought Lin Feng, whose heart stopped for a second. These 8 people were all at least at the 4th Xian Qi layer. They were incredibly powerful. Behind, 2 people, who were trying to escape, were also approaching the cultivator with the spear. He looked puzzled and then his body slowly became rigid. These 2 people were from the cosmic pavilion. Lin Feng knew the girl. On that day, when the Ant Yun had tried to get the ancient cauldron from Lin Feng, that person was there as well. It was Lan Jiao. Many people of the cosmic pavilion had come thinking that they would definitely get the ancient cauldron. Nonetheless, almost all of them had died in Celestial River. Those who want to escape die, said the cultivator with the spear sounding cold and detached. He took a huge step forwards. His spear was unceasingly gathering deadly energy. A terrifying pure black chi emerged in the atmosphere. He was about to throw his spear. Stop, said a voice coming from the sky, which surprised the man with the spear. Immediately after, a silhouette fell from the sky, landing by Lan Jiao's side. That person was precisely Lin Feng. The man with the spear was surprised, and had an extremely cold expression on his face. You cannot kill her, Lin Feng said, sounding indifferent. The man silently put down his spear and immediately turned to Aunt Yun, who was also running away. The man was surprisingly listening to Lin Feng and letting Lan Jiao live. Lin Feng took a deep breath. Before that, Lan Jiao had tried to warn him a few times. Lin Feng appreciated the help she gave him in the past. If he could save her, he wouldn't hesitate. Save me, said Aunt Yun when she saw the cultivator with the spear was moving towards her. She was looking at Lin Feng with hope in her eyes. Lin Feng, looking cold and detached, looked at Aunt Yun and said expressionlessly, "Last time you wanted to kill me, and now you want me to save you?" Aunt Yun's heart was pounding. Her heart was filled with regret. In her thoughts there was only one thought. One careless move and the whole game is lost. She perfectly knew what kind of temperament Lin Feng had. He was stubborn and determined. Why had she tried to steal the cauldron from Lin Feng? She should have thought about the results. She initially just didn't care about gaining Lin Feng's wrath. All she thought was that she could rely on her strength to obtain the cauldron, and that she could kill Lin Feng at any time. However, in life everything can quickly change. She hadn't managed to kill Lin Feng when she had had the opportunity, and at this moment, because of that, she would lose her own life. She was going to die because of one wrong move. The long spear was releasing an incredible deadly energy. Aunt Yun's face was filled with regret and hatred. She closed her eyes and did not feel like resisting. Even if she could resist for a short period of time, the result would be the same. Her death was already sealed. She could get killed here or by the king-class evil ectoplasm. She had no way out. Besides, getting killed by a spear was much better than dying after having qi and blood sucked from the body. "Aunt Yun!" shouted Lan Jiao while her eyes were filling with tears. Lin Feng was preventing her from moving to help. She couldn't move from that spot. Suddenly an unfathomable voice emerged in the air. Lin Feng dragged Lan Jiao backwards. At that moment, he saw many people getting killed either by the king-class evil ectoplasm or by the spears from the cultivators blocking people's retreat. At that moment, apart from Lin Feng, his friends and the 8 cultivators with spears, everyone had died. Of course, there was also the mysterious person leaning against the city wall. "Little brat, you are really audacious," the king-class evil ectoplasm said while evilly staring at Lin Feng, which made a cold light flash through Lin Feng's eyes. "Haven't you noticed that they are waiting for you?" Lin Feng said while pointing at the 8 cultivators in black clothes. Lin Feng sounded cold and detached. He hadn't left because he had realized that these 8 people as well as the person leaning against the city wall had come to kill the king-class evil ectoplasm. They had prepared everything earlier. Perhaps it was all part of their plan. The king-class evil ectoplasm wasn't stupid. He had also noticed these things. He then evilly stared at the 8 cultivators with the spears and said coldly, "You are quite strong, but a moment ago, I killed some people who were much stronger than you. How come you think that you can be so audacious?" "Because of me," said a deep voice interrupting. The mysterious person leaning against the city wall slowly started moving towards them. He still hadn't raised his head and was still looking at the ground. In a flash, he had crossed 100 meters and arrived in front of the king-class evil ectoplasm. "This is Shuiyu. Since the evil cultivators of the Tiansha sect have come here, there is no need for you to leave anymore," said a cold voice coming from one cultivator in a black Chong Pao. Immediately after that person raised his head, a bright and resplendent light emerged and flashed. It was dazzling to the eyes. "How impudent! I would have never thought that in a tiny little country such as Shuiyu, someone would ever dare talk to me like that," said the king-class evil ectoplasm. He was drifting in the air and was releasing some evil qi. "How impudent! I would have never thought that in a tiny little country such as Shuiyu, someone would ever dare talk to me like that," said the king-class evil ectoplasm. He was drifting in the air and was releasing some evil chi. However, I would like to know who you are, said the king-class evil ectoplasm, and at that moment, an endless amount of chains moved towards the man in the black Chong Pao as well as the 8 cultivators with their spears. However, at that moment, pure chi was emerging out of these 8 cultivators' spears and bombarded the atmosphere. Die! They shouted furiously. The long spears started crossing the sky at the same time. 8 dragons made of pure chi were crossing the atmosphere. Their protruding teeth were terrifying. Rumbling sounds spread in the atmosphere and the chains started shaking violently, to the extent that a certain number of them even broke into 1,000 pieces. Besides, at the same time, the mystical cultivator in the black Chong Pao jumped into the air. He moved his hands and suddenly, a terrifying vortex appeared in the air. Behind the king-class evil ectoplasm appeared a gigantic door. It was gigantic. It looked like a black hole made of deadly chi. It was releasing a terrifying chi. Sharp lights were flashing in Lin Feng's eyes. That was a blood spirit. It was the sealed doors. That person belongs to the imperial clan, thought Lin Feng while his heartbeat started accelerating. He had already seen that deadly black chi. Duan Feng had already used it, but Duan Feng's chi was far from being as frightening and monstrous. Duan clan! Shouted the king, whose facial expression drastically changed. It seemed like he wanted to say something else, but the sealed door was moving towards quicker and quicker. New body reincarnation is just a lower demonic skill. That's all. It relies on the strength of the soul. It is no match when facing the sealed doors of my blood spirit, shouted the man in the black clothes. Each sound in the atmosphere was followed by the appearance of a sealed door. In a flash, the king-class evil ectoplasm was surrounded by 5 sealed doors. He was confined in the middle of all the sealed doors. A terrifying chi was emerging from these sealed doors. That cultivator in black clothes looked as cold and detached as before. He then said, sounding ice-cold, "Sealed soul." When he finished talking, the 5 sealed doors all transformed into the same character, seal, and immediately crashed into the king's body. Boom! A gigantic rumbling noise spread in the air. The king's muscles were ripped apart. A black illusion appeared, however, each seal would further seal his soul. How terrifying! Lin Feng's eyes were flashing. These sealed doors were extremely strong. Besides, it seemed like the sealed doors had extremely strong effects on the king-class evil ectoplasm. It was restricting his new body reincarnation skill, otherwise the cultivator in the black Chong Pao wouldn't have been his opponent. As expected, it was all under control. It was planned already on how to kill the king-class evil ectoplasm. Maybe the one who made the plan for everybody to meet outside of Celestial River was the cultivator in the black Chong Pao. A light flashed and a huge umbrella emerged from the mystical cultivator's hands. The umbrella opened itself, but in the middle of it, there was an incredible golden light and some terrifying chi. Go! Shouted the mystical cultivator coldly. The golden umbrella left his hands and rushed towards the king's soul at full speed. It immediately crashed into his soul. Close! Shouted the cultivator. The umbrella then slowly closed itself. A moment later, the terrifying chi disappeared without trace, and the seals vanished from the atmosphere as well. In the atmosphere, there was an endless stream of powerless chains falling from the sky. The king's soul had disappeared. When Lin Feng saw the umbrella go back into the cultivator's hands, he felt a bit agitated. The soul had disappeared. That cultivator in black clothes had managed to deal with the king's soul. A light flashed and the umbrella disappeared. The cultivator put it back into the Na stone of his ring. He slowly descended from the sky onto the ground and said, sounding cold and detached, "If you see other spies from other countries, you know what to do." When he finished talking, the 8 cultivators' silhouettes flickered. In a flash, they disappeared and started searching the outskirts. Besides, at the same time, the cultivator in the black Chong Pao slowly turned around. His head was still a bit low. He then said to Lin Feng, "Initially I was going to follow you to get it back, but you didn't leave. Take it out now." When he said that, Lin Feng was stupefied. Lin Feng remained silent and that cultivator in black spoke again. "Should I remind you that you have the heavenly dragon cauldron in your possession?" As expected, Lin Feng was stupefied. What an acute perception. Lin Feng thought that nobody knew about it. He hadn't thought that his interlocutor would find it out. The 13 evil ectoplasms had stolen the heavenly dragon cauldron. However, at the moment when the king absorbed them, the ancient cauldron hadn't appeared. Even when the king died, the cauldron hadn't appeared either. That was only because the evil ectoplasm who attacked Lin Feng was the one with the cauldron, and when Lin Feng had killed him, he immediately put the cauldron into the knawstone of his ring. However, the entire crowd had only seen the brilliance of Lin Feng's sword. They hadn't seen the small movement of taking the cauldron. That was also the reason why the king-class evil ectoplasm, a moment before, had said that Lin Feng was audacious. Lin Feng smiled and took out a cauldron and left it on the ground. It was the heavenly dragon cauldron. "You can leave," said the cultivator in black while giving a warm smile and picking up the cauldron. Lin Feng nodded indifferently, turned around and immediately started leaving. At that moment, the 8 cultivators with their spears returned to the cultivator in black. They had accomplished their mission. Lin Feng entered Celestial River and looked at the ground filled with corpses. It was a river of blood. As before, blood was still flowing on the ground. Coldness invaded Lin Feng's heart. As expected, these 8 cultivators with their spears had killed every single witness and spy that was hiding in the distance. Nobody knew what had happened apart from the cultivator in black and the 8 cultivators themselves, as well as Lin Feng and his friends. That bloodbath, however, was probably also a warning to Lin Feng and the others. Warm smile and easy to talk with? Thought Lin Feng while smiling coldly. If it was the emotionless monarch or brutal and unruly prince, would that care about a few trivial lives of Lin Feng and his friends? Some of the cultivators from the Duan clan were warm and friendly though. They were easy to speak with. "Your Highness, next time you want something just tell me," said Lin Feng from the distance, which reached the ears of the other cultivators. The cultivator in the black Chong Pao was a bit surprised. Immediately after, he slowly raised his head and looked at Lin Feng's silhouette on the horizon. He didn't look cold and detached anymore. On the contrary, he suddenly looked warm and friendly. Considering how quick-witted Lin Feng was, he had guessed that Lin Feng would have an idea of his identity, but he didn't expect him to break the silence and admit it. Duan Wuya smiled and didn't think about it anymore. He then said, "Lin Feng, come back to the Imperial City soon. The great competition of Shui will start soon. We have to select the nation's young geniuses. Those who are going to join it are, for example, the 8 high officials. Lin Feng, with your natural talent, you could also participate in the competition. Besides, nowadays, the situation between the 13 countries of Shui is not so peaceful anymore." "Lin Feng will remember your Highness' words," replied a voice from far away on the horizon. Immediately after, Lin Feng's silhouette gradually disappeared from Duan Wuya's vision. After Lin Feng left, Duan Wuya glanced at all the corpses and immediately smiled. "We have gained so much this time. The heavenly dragon cauldron was a great reward. Even though it was a damaged cauldron, it was still priceless. Besides, he had also trapped the king's soul, which was priceless as well." When Duan Wuya thought about these things, he looked delighted. Besides, many of his enemies and other countries' spies had died as well. "Let's go," said Duan Wuya, sounding cold and detached. He then started moving at full speed, followed by his companions. They went back to the Imperial City. The 9 silhouettes flickered and in a flash, they had almost safely left Celestial River. However, at that moment Duan Wuya stopped. He wasn't the only one. The 8 other cultivators stopped as well. They were all looking in one direction. They were looking at the Celestial River City Gate where Duan Wuya had been standing before. At that moment there was a silhouette. That person's back was facing Duan Wuya and the others. That person was carrying an ancient sword and his Chong Pao was fluttering in the wind. His long hair was following the wind and shining in the sun. That person looked natural and unrestrained, but also a bit lonely. That natural and unrestrained yet lonely-looking silhouette seemed like he had come from ancient times. No one could sense his movements, as if he had always been there. That natural and unrestrained yet lonely-looking silhouette seemed like he had come from ancient times. No one could sense his movements, as if he had always been there. Duan Wuya smiled and uncovered his face, after which his warm and friendly-looking face appeared, as well as his smile. He slightly bowed and said, while looking at that person's back, "Duan Wuya salutes Wu Qing." If other people had seen Duan Wuya bow in front of someone else, they would have been extraordinarily surprised. Duan Wuya was a prince in Shuiyu. He was extremely strong and was the fourth-ranked high official. He rarely engaged in battles. Some people even conjectured that he was going to become the third-ranked soon. People whom he respected to such a degree were extremely rare. However, that lonely silhouette was one of them. Zhuge Wuqing could slice people into pieces with cruel sword skills. At 15 years old, Wuqing learned how to control sword force, sword-based energy attacks at 18, sword fusion at 21, and had become a true sword cultivator at 24. However, even though the man didn't need a sword, he was still carrying an ancient sword on his back. That person's hands were much sharper than any sword could ever be. His sword attacks were expressionless, thus people gave him the title the Emotionless Sword. Zhuge Wuqing was the best sword cultivator of the entire Shuiyu country. Duan Wuya could still only see Zhuge Wuqing's back. His clothes were fluttering in the wind. Wuqing then said, sounding indifferent, "Second Prince, you should understand why I have come here." Duan Wuya smiled wryly. Wuqing the Emotionless Sword, after obtaining his sword, hadn't returned to the imperial city and was not planning on going back. There was only one reason he was here. In the entire universe, there was only one person who could make a request of him in the imperial city. Duan Wuya perfectly understood why Wuqing had come. "Senior Wuqing, I have come all the from the imperial city. It was a very long journey." "Stop!" shouted Wuqing, interrupting Duan Wuya. He sounded ice-cold. There wasn't the least bit of warmth in his voice. Duan Wuya smiled wryly. He hadn't thought that things would turn out this way. "I understand," said Duan Wuya. A light flashed and the heavenly dragon cauldron appeared. His long sleeves fluttered and immediately, the ancient cauldron flew through the air to Wuqing. "Duan Wuya has delivered the ancient cauldron," said Duan Wuya, who understood Wuqing. His emotionless sword could split apart anybody, including him, Duan Wuya. The ancient cauldron flew towards Wuqing. His sleeve fluttered and immediately, it disappeared. He had received it, looking absolutely cold and detached. It didn't seem to affect him at all. "Thank you, Second Prince, for having helped me achieve my aim." When he finished talking, Wuqing's silhouette flickered and, just like a sword, he pierced the atmosphere. In the air there was just the glow of a sword as he disappeared into thin air. Even though he had thanked Duan Wuya, he hadn't sounded grateful at all. It was just a way to remain courteous, nothing more. It was just like when Duan Wuya had wanted the cauldron, Lin Feng had no choice in the matter. If he didn't want to give it, the cauldron would still belong to the other party. Asking and thanking were just formalities. Duan Wuya looked at that silhouette disappearing in the horizon and smiled wryly. If he had known earlier that things would happen that way, he wouldn't have risked defending Lin Feng. Wuqing, extraordinarily, had left his mountain to obtain the cauldron. "Let's go back," said Duan Wuya. The wry smile on his face gradually switched back to a warm and tender facial expression. He had lost the ancient cauldron, but it didn't matter. Wasn't it a good thing that Wuqing had appeared? They were on the same side. Lin Feng knew nothing about what happened after he left. He had gone back to Mr. Hua's residence. He looked at the two old men and said, "Mr. Hua, Mr. Qi, I have to go back to Yangzhou City." "Mr. Hua, Mr. Qi, thank you for having taken care of me in Celestial River for this short period of time." Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi glanced at each other and immediately smiled. They then said to Lin Feng, "Lin Feng, Mr. Qi and I have already made up our mind. We want to follow you." "Follow me." Lin Feng's pupils shrank. Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi were cultivators of the Xian Qi layer. One of them was at the third Ling Qi layer while the other one was at the fourth Xian Qi layer. They were much stronger than him. Surprisingly, they wanted to follow him. "Indeed, follow you. Lin Feng, you're not going to leave behind two old men like us, right?" said Mr. Qi while giving an honest smile. Lin Feng was stupefied and then immediately smiled as well. "Since Mr. Qi and Mr. Hua are willing to follow me, I will not refuse. Having you two on my side would make it much safer," said Lin Feng while smiling. He obviously knew what the two old men thought. Mr. Qi and Mr. Hua had faith in his potential and his character. Lin Feng was, of course, not going to refuse their help. At least, in the previous days, the old men had helped him to an incredible degree. If he became extremely strong in the future, he would not leave them behind. Lan Jiao, who was there as well, was surprised. She was looking at Lin Feng with twinkling eyes. Lin Feng had extremely high natural talent, but in the end, he was still a cultivator of the Ling Qi layer. Even though he was far from being able to compete with Mr. Qi or Mr. Hua, these two old men were still willing to follow him. Lin Feng's position in the hearts of the two old men was obvious. It was very high. They were willing to follow him because they knew that he was going to become extremely strong someday, and would return the favor. Unfortunately, the people of the Dream Pavilion could have been friends with Lin Feng as well. Besides, at the beginning, Aunt Yun also wanted to match Lin Feng and Lan Jiao. But in the end, because of the ancient cauldron, they had made him their enemy. Aunt Yun had threatened Lin Feng. She wanted him to hand over the ancient cauldron, but Lin Feng refused. Aunt Yun thus wanted to kill him. But now, all the strong cultivators of the Cosmic Pavilion in Celestial River were killed. Lan Jiao was the only one left, and this was only because Lin Feng had saved her. She had the feeling that everything was a dream. She had been in the Dream Pavilion for a year, and it had been completely destroyed. Who? At that moment, Lin Feng was surprised. Immediately after, he immediately left. At the same time, Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi also moved towards the exit, extremely quickly. However, at the moment when they arrived outside, they saw a silhouette in the distance. That person had an ancient sword on his back. That person's sword Qi disappeared and their silhouette vanished as well. There was only a white sword Qi trail left in the atmosphere. It looked amazing. How strong, said Mr. Hua when he saw the trail left in the air. He was astonished. How monstrously powerful. That silhouette had moved through the sky like a meteor. He was extremely quick and had left a trail through the sky as if it was cut by a sword. How strong. Maybe he's a high-level cultivator of Xian Qi layer. Whispered Mr. Qi. He meant that the cultivator had possibly broken through to the 7th, 8th or 9th Xian Qi layer. That person surprisingly had silently appeared outside of Mr. Hua's residence, and then in a flash, disappeared again. Look! Shouted Mr. Hua, gasping with astonishment. Immediately they looked at the ground. There was an ancient cauldron. It was peacefully lying on the ground. Boom! Their hearts were pounding. Surprisingly, the ancient cauldron was there. Lin Feng had handed the heavenly dragon cauldron over to Duan Wu. Yeah, a moment before, and now it was appearing in front of them once again. He came to give us the cauldron. They thought while looking at the vanishing silhouette in the distance. That strong cultivator had come to give them the cauldron? Besides, the fact that the cauldron was suddenly appearing again, it meant that it had been taken back from Duan Wuya. Lin Feng and the others were filled with doubts and suspicions. They didn't understand why the strong cultivator would have seized the cauldron and gave it back to them. Lin Feng, hurry up and take the cauldron, said Mr. Hua. Lin Feng slightly nodded. His silhouette flickered. He grabbed the cauldron and put it in the Na stone of his ring. Immediately after, he returned to his original position. Lin Feng, do you know that person? Asked Mr. Hua. Lin Feng's eyes flashed and he shook his head. Amongst the people he knew, the only one who could be that strong was Yan Yu Pingshang, but that was definitely not him. But why had he given him the cauldron? This is way too strange, said Mr. Hua while frowning. He didn't understand. First, Lin Feng had the cauldron, then many groups stole it from him and were fighting over it. But in the end it had returned to Lin Feng's hands. That person had come to give it to Lin Feng, but Lin Feng didn't know why. Lin Feng, could it be one of your parents' friends? Asked Mr. Qi. He then saw Lin Feng's eyes flash. Immediately after, Lin Feng shook his head. His father, Lin Hai, probably didn't have such strong friends. Besides, he had never seen his mother. Impossible, said Lin Feng. What's the point in thinking so much? If the other person wanted to be recognized, they wouldn't have left in a flash. If that person doesn't want to show themselves, what's the point in trying to figure it out? You will find it out when they want you to know, said Lan Jiao. Lin Feng slightly nodded. Indeed, since the person had handed the cauldron over and left, it was because that person didn't want them to know their identity. Was thinking so much over it really necessary? Lin Feng had the cauldron. That was the most important thing. Maybe we will have the opportunity to find it out who that was in the future, thought Lin Feng. Yangzhou City was growing. At the gate, the guards looked majestic and ice-cold. Outside of the city, in front of the gate, there were two Wuxia armored horses looking at the sky and neighing. Yangzhou City was growing. At the gate, the guards looked majestic and ice-cold. Outside of the city, in front of the gate, there were two Wuxia armored horses looking at the sky and neighing. Beside these two horses, there were two bronze statues. They looked alive. One of them was the creator of the Wuxia armored horses, Lu Tsonglan. Lu Tsonglan looked a bit strict with a soft touch. There was also a similar qi around the statue. Surprisingly, on that statue, there was a qi similar to Lu Tsonglan's qi, which made the statue even more lifelike. The other statue was the representation of a young man. That young man looked calm, serene and handsome. That statue looked alive. His eyes were closed and he had a meaningful expression. Some arrogance was also emanating from the statue. That young man looked heroic, natural and unrestrained. That young man was the officer of the Wuxia army, the Marquis of Yangzhou City, also known as the Wuxia Marquis. These two statues were commemorative monuments. They were monuments to the powerful commanders, as if Yangzhou City would always be protected by them. Outside of the city, many people were paying homage to these statues. Lu Tsonglan, the divine arrow, was considered as a hero by many people. He was a hero who had nearly been killed by the imperial family. Life had been truly cruel to him. This was not a good time to be a hero. Only those who had an incredible strength could scare their enemies away, especially if the enemy was the imperial family. People in Yangzhou City were chatting and laughing. It seemed like they were all in a good mood. After Lin Feng had become the Marquis of Yangzhou City, the city had dramatically increased in size. Majestic cultivation buildings had been erected across the city. For example, the entrance into the city also looked imposing, especially since all the guards were Wuxia troops. Their watchful eyes like gods looking down on mortals. At that moment, Yangzhou City had indubitably become an adequate place for a marquis to live. It had become a place of growing influence. After the army of Wuxia troops came to Yangzhou City, cultivation had become one of the core principles of the city. Therefore, people's cultivation level was also becoming better each day. They had all persistently started practicing cultivation. They also hoped that someday they would be able to reach the sky, become a marquis and command people around them. That sort of culture and atmosphere attracted people from all the neighboring regions. Many people were moving to Yangzhou City each day. A gigantic eagle shrieked in the distance, which made all the people, who had gathered in front of the city gate, gaze into the distance. They only saw a black dot on the horizon. It was coming towards them at full speed. It looked clearer and clearer with each second. It's a ferocious beast. When the crowd saw the shape in the sky, their bodies went rigid. It was a ferocious beast and it was crying out. Sharp murderous lights were flashing through its eyes. It was releasing a bestial qi. Its huge wings were moving in the air, and each time they moved, they created a hurricane-like wind. At the same time, in one breath, that beast could cross a distance of 1,000 meters. It was a bird of prey. Besides, what astonished people the most was that two silhouettes were standing on the back of that ferocious beast. An extremely strong wind was blowing around them, which made their clothes and long hair flutter in the wind. They looked calm and unrestrained. There was a young woman and a young man. The young man was handsome. His figure seemed slender and ladylike. His arrogant-looking eyes also contained a cold indifference. He had a strange expression in his eyes. Concerning that girl, she was also very beautiful. She also looked insufferably arrogant, as if she was a princess. She looked like she had an incredibly high social status. "Brother, this is Yangzhou City," said that girl indifferently. Her soft voice contained some arrogance as well. "Indeed, it is Yangzhou City," nodded the young man. "My teacher told me that recently, a young prodigy has appeared in Shuiyu. His name is Lin Feng. He is younger than you. Nowadays, he has already become the Marquis of Yangzhou City, and the entire city worships him. You see these two statues? The one that represents a young man must be Lin Feng," said the young girl while pointing at Lin Feng's statue. She sounded cold and indifferent. The young man seemed surprised, and a sharp and bestial light flashed in his eyes. "Humph, Marquis. It's just a trivial title. Even if Shuiyu wanted to give me that title, I would refuse it with disdain. Besides, concerning the genius your teacher told you about, he has only broken through to the 7th Ling Chi layer. In my eyes he is a nobody. I can kill him in one strike. The young man was insufferably arrogant and megalomaniac. When the young woman heard him, she laughed. People all reacted differently. Of course it is unlikely that he can compete with you. You just have to understand that our teacher is over 150 years old. However, he has only accepted us as his students, which means that your strength and natural talent is higher than that of the lower-ranked high officials. Concerning those at the top of the rankings, you will soon be stronger than even them. Obviously, replied the young man, sounding indifferent, as if fate was completely under his control. The great competition of Shui will start soon. The best cultivators of Shui are all going to the imperial city to practice and get prepared, with the intention to fully display their abilities. Another strong wind started blowing on the crowd, which made them lose balance and fall down. That eagle was flying into the air again. It was flying away from the countless Qi Xie troops who were unceasingly rushing out of the city to do battle. My name is Ling Tian. Tell Lin Feng that if he wants to get his revenge, he can come and find me in the imperial city, said Ling Tian, whose insufferably arrogant voice fell down from the heavens. It made people's hearts race. The eagle flapped its wings even faster and the black in the sky vanished. How powerful! That eagle must be a Xian-level beast. The crowd was looking at the gradually disappearing silhouette. Their hearts were trembling. His name was Ling Tian. At the same time, when the Qi Xie troops who had rushed over saw the corpses on the ground and the wrecked statue, hideous expressions appeared on their faces which were filled with hatred. It seemed like Ling Tian had just created thousands of new enemies. At that moment, in the distance on an ancient road, a few horses could be seen. They were galloping at full speed, raising a cloud of dust behind them. However, all the people riding these horses looked tense. These people were Lin Feng and the others. Besides, a moment before, they had heard the young man's arrogant words. But they didn't know what was going on in Yangzhou City. Their horses started galloping even faster towards the city. Lin Feng, a moment ago, that beast was a Xian-level beast, said Mr. Hua. The eagle had flown above their heads, so they had obviously seen it too. Lin Feng remained silent. A short time after, they were almost at the gate of Yangzhou City. It's our officer. Officer Lin Feng is back. Outside of Yangzhou City, some people had noticed Lin Feng in the distance. They were surprised. In a flash, Lin Feng had arrived at the gate. When he saw dozens of Qi Xie corpses on the ground, his facial expression drastically changed. Lin Tian. Lin Feng raised his head to look at the sky where the eagle had disappeared, and his face was filled with killing intent. Imperial City, whispered Lin Feng. He didn't know Ling Tian at all. Besides, when Lin Feng was in the Imperial City, he had also never heard that name. Imperial City, whispered Lin Feng. He didn't know Ling Tian at all. Besides, when Lin Feng was in the Imperial City, he had also never heard that name. But Ling Tian had come to Yangzhou City make a show of his strength. He had shown how powerful he was. He had even killed a group of Qi Xie troops and had left after leaving a message for Lin Feng. He said if Lin Feng wanted to get his revenge, he could go to the Imperial City and find him. For him, life had no value. In his eyes, people and beasts were just lambs to the slaughter. In order to prove how strong he was, he didn't hesitate to kill those in his way. I will make you regret this, said Lin Feng, sounding ice cold. He was going to leave for the Imperial City very quickly. Duan Wuya had said that the Shuiyu Great Competition was approaching. Those days in the Shuiyu country, some geniuses were on the rise. That was why Ling Tian was going to the Imperial City as well. Besides, perhaps there would be many people like Ling Tian appearing to participate in the competition. Officer, saluted the Qi Xie troops. Their voices showed that they were furious. Their faces were red with anger and were filled with murderous intentions. Bury them properly. I will head to the Imperial City, said Lin Feng, sounding detached. These people were all biting their lips. Their faces were filled with hatred. They slowly nodded. Immediately after, they picked up the dismembered body parts and left to bury them. In the distance, people were whispering all sorts of things. Yangzhou City cultivators were much too weak. Cultivators of the Ling Qi layer were considered as extremely strong in Yangzhou City, especially amongst young people. They were even considered as incredible geniuses. However, when they saw that extremely strong and terrifying young man riding his eagle, people were thinking that his cultivation level had exceeded the Ling Qi layer already. That terrifying genius gave people the feeling that they were way too inferior in comparison. They had just witnessed a strength which they had never even imagined was possible. They had the same experience with Lin Feng. He was also extremely strong. When they saw that handsome young man on his horse, the crowd started wondering what their officer's cultivation level was. In comparison with the insufferably arrogant young man, who would win? Lin Feng obviously wasn't going to have such thoughts. He and his friends were galloping at full speed towards the interior of Yangzhou City. The seat of the government was much bigger than in the past. Inside it looked like a huge fortress. It was gigantic. Besides, it also looked very dangerous. At that moment, Feng Yuhan, Lei Qingtian and the other officers were greeting Lin Feng. He couldn't rely on the support of too many strong cultivators if he wanted to become stronger. He could only become stronger on his own. That would be the only way for him to reach the sky. Besides, if he had been much stronger, the deaths that had occurred earlier that day would have never came about. Besides, he also needed Mr. Qi and Mr. Hua to stay in Yangzhou City for another reason. Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi, my Qi Xie troops are stationed in Yangzhou City. They are my elite soldiers. They have all broken through to the Ling Qi layer, but I still think that it will not be enough. I need them to constantly become stronger. I actually went to Celestial River because of them, said Lin Feng to the two old men and continued. I need them to become monstrously strong. Giving them the pills we have already concocted will help, but it's still not enough. I hope that you two can stay in Yangzhou City and help me achieve my goal. Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi frowned and immediately said, do you want us to concoct even more pills for them to improve their cultivation? That is one of the tasks I would require from you. Besides, I hope that your presence can motivate them, and you could also assist my 3 officers in creating a real elite army. Of course, if you two have particular requests and needs, for example, if you need some spiritual herbs, you can always send out the army to go and collect herbs for you. It is also good for their cultivation practice to be sent on adventures, said Lin Feng, sounding respectful. Even though these Qi Xie troops were already elite troops, Lin Feng still thought that it wasn't enough. That kind of strength wasn't monstrous. They were merely a mortal army, and he needed an army that would soar into the clouds. The old men's eyes were sparkling. At the same time, Ren Qingquang and the 2 other officers also had sparkling eyes. These 2 old cultivators of the Xianqi layer seemed to know a lot about alchemy. All right, Lin Feng, since we came with you, we will listen to everything you say, said Mr. Qi while nodding. Indeed. You decide. We will do our best to help you achieve your goals, said Mr. Hua immediately after. Since they had already decided to follow Lin Feng, they obviously had to put aside their pride as cultivators of the Xianqi layer and listen to Lin Feng. Otherwise, following him wouldn't provide any benefits to him. Thank you, both of you, said Lin Feng while nodding. Immediately after, he looked at the 3 officers and said, Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi are at the 3rd and 4th Xianqi layer. They are extremely strong, and on top of that, they have extraordinary alchemy knowledge. From today, you will do your best to work with them. If they have any request, you must do your best to fulfill it. They were both advanced Xianqi layer cultivators. Besides, they were also amazing alchemists. Ren Qingquang and the 2 other officers were dumbstruck. How powerful! Such strong cultivators had surprisingly decided to follow Lin Feng. Obviously, the officers were right in following Lin Feng. All right, said the 3 officers while nodding. 2 alchemists were there to assist them. They were of course satisfied with that. Uncle Ran, in the stone of that ring, there are 120,000 pills, spiritual sanguine pills, pure earth pills, vitality pills and red sun pills. If these 4 pills are taken at the same time, people under the 6th Ling Qi layer will instantly break through to the next layer. They may even have multiple breakthroughs. Even cultivators of the 7th and 8th Ling Qi layer can expect a breakthrough when consuming these pills. Please take care of them, said Lin Feng while handing a ring to Ren Qingquang, which made his heart start to violently pound. 120,000 pills. for different pills which when used together, could make a cultivator instantly break through. That was enough to make 30,000 cultivators break through to the next layer, in a short period of time. That was terrifying. Even though he had been on the battlefield for many years and could control his emotions, at that moment it was difficult for him not to express his astonishment. At that moment his heart was pounding. "Take it," said Lin Feng while putting the ring in Ren Qingquang's hand. He then said, "I need my troops to become the strongest. You need to select an elite group to pay special attention to, and they need to have at least the strength of the 7th Ling Qi layer. My soldiers must be loyal and courageous. They must all have these qualities. Besides, I hope that Uncle Ren can make the Qixia troops into an army of strong cultivators. I want every soldier to break through the 5th Ling Qi layer as a minimum. All of them, at least the 5th Ling Qi layer." Ren Qingquang's heart was pounding. He had never dared think about such a monstrous army. Ren Qingquang was looking at Lin Feng and only thinking of how ambitious and brave the young man was. Since he was following Lin Feng, he had already wondered if Lin Feng would make the Qixia troops into a fearsome army. Ren Qingquang was looking at Lin Feng and only thinking of how ambitious and brave the young man was. Since he was following Lin Feng, he had already wondered if Lin Feng would make the Qixia troops into a fearsome army. He was hoping that Lin Feng would be able to carry out this extremely difficult task in the future. However, in a very short time, Lin Feng had managed to astonish him by bringing 120,000 pills which could make 30,000 cultivators instantly break through. What he had been trying to do for many years, Lin Feng had done in a very short time due to his hard work and determination. Besides, Lin Feng was resolute. He had immediately handed the pills over, giving Ren Qingquang a huge responsibility. "Uncle Ren, Mr. Qi and Mr. Hua will help you to break through to the Xian Qi layer. Our forces will become much stronger that way," said Lin Feng. The 3 officers were dumbstruck. Xian Qi layer. Who would refuse becoming incredibly stronger? "Mr. Hua, Mr. Qi," said Lin Feng while turning to the 2 old men. He saw that the 2 old looked irresolute, yet they immediately said, "We will find a solution." "All right," said Lin Feng. Immediately after, he looked at Ren Qingquang again and said, "Uncle Ren, Uncle Feng, Uncle Lei, and you are experienced officers. You obviously don't need me to teach you anything. I just want to say that these days, even though you are not on a battlefield, our troops cannot lose their fighting spirit and ardor. No matter if we are talking about their determination or their courage, they need to continue on the path of blood. They need to keep fighting and continue facing danger. Only that way will they be able to increase their cultivation. After I leave, the troops must regularly go out on missions to practice. Besides, they will potentially gain extra battle experience. We cannot show mercy. If they don't face danger during their breakthroughs, they will never benefit and become truly strong." These troops had all survived previous wars. After all their previous experiences, Ren Qingquang obviously hoped that none of them would die. Lin Feng had to remind him that if they kept the troops in a safe and nurturing environment, would they remain as battle-hardened warriors? "All right," said Ren Qingquang while nodding. He understood what Lin Feng meant. It was already clear to him. Lin Feng was right to remind him of what made their army so powerful. If they protected their army in the city, and didn't give them the opportunity to fight any battles, they would become docile and their cultivation would suffer. These people were fearless even when facing death. These Qixia troops had to remain in a constant state of battle. When Ren Yin made a wise decision and joined the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, it was a brilliant move from his part. If he had stayed with the Yunhai sect and remained the most prodigious disciple, his prestige would have been limited, but by joining the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, he will always have opportunities to show his strength in the imperial city. It was said that when Ren Yin has already broken through to the 7th Ling Qi layer and is monstrously strong. Besides, his blue bamboo spirit has become abnormally strong. Coupled with Duan Yu's blood spirit, it is definitely a perfect match. How could Ren Yin be considered as a genius of the Yunhai sect? Back in the days, the real genius was Lin Feng. At the moment when the Yunhai sect was being exterminated, every outstanding disciple betrayed the sect except for Lin Feng, whose heart was as unmoving as a mountain. He stuck to his principles. His destiny will definitely be extraordinary, said a 15-year-old cultivator, contradicting the other person who had just arrogantly spoken out. Even though Lin Feng was only in the imperial city for half a year, many people still worshipped Lin Feng. The facts that he had set a city on fire and crossed into another country to save the princess was still the topic of people's conversations. They admired and idolized Lin Feng. They hoped that they would be able to walk on the same path as Lin Feng and become one of the great cultivators of Shuiyu. You don't understand anything, said the cultivator who had just been contradicted. He said, sounding cold and detached. When Ren Yan is a genius, he is a genius of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. Even though he has only broken through to the 7th Ling Qi layer, he still has amazing combat ability in real battle. He is extremely strong. He can defeat cultivators of the 8th Ling Qi layer. Concerning Lin Feng, nobody even knows where he went. Maybe he is already dead. How can you even compare a dead man with one Ren Yan? Stop talking shit. How could Lin Feng die? Shouted the other one furiously. I said that Lin Feng is probably dead by now. What does that have to do with you? Now go wash out your filthy mouth, said the arrogant one, sounding ice cold, releasing some his qi. He was trying to show off his strength in front of the two beautiful young girls. When Ren Yan could never even touch the shadow of Lin Feng. You're the one who's talking shit, replied the young cultivator, sounding ice cold. Even though his interlocutor was also extremely strong, he was still arguing. At that moment, the beautiful and voluptuous young woman next to the handsome young man smiled and said in a low voice, I would never have thought that there would be people who worshipped and adored you so much, that they wouldn't even care about the consequences when defending you. Lin Feng smiled wryly and scratched his head. He had the strange feeling that he had become older and gained a great responsibility. Since the moment that the Yunhai sect had been annihilated until that moment, less than 2 years had passed. Those days, Lin Feng wasn't even 18 years old yet, was already worshipped by a vast majority of people. Of course, who else had managed to achieve so much in the short period of 2 years? He had nearly died so many times. All of his adventures were legendary. Lin Feng had the feeling that he had already spent a long time in this world. I would have never thought that when Ren Yan would marry Duan Yu. That's amusing, said Lin Feng while smiling indifferently. It also seemed that the tension between Lin Feng and when Ren Yan had stayed the same over time. At that moment, the person who was criticizing Lin Feng was releasing his qi, and it was becoming more cold and violent. He walked towards the young person and said coldly, reckless little boy, since you cannot shut your filthy mouth, I will shut it for you. That person started walking towards the young cultivator. His hand shot straight towards the young man, which made the young man's face change drastically. He was blankly staring at the hand that was rushing towards him. A whistling sound spread in the atmosphere and the punch was completely stopped. The man then turned his head and shouted, "Who dares?" When he finished talking, he slowly turned around and immediately looked at Lin Feng, who was walking towards him. "You are also a reckless little boy," said that person while looking at Lin Feng and smiling coldly. "I don't want to kill you. I just wanted to tell you to shut your filthy mouth," said Lin Feng indifferently. "Oh, me? A filthy mouth?" said that person while smiling coldly, and then added, "What makes you think that you are entitled to criticize me?" "Because I am Lin Feng," said Lin Feng, which made the man's smile turn crooked. "Oh, I am Lin Feng. Oh, Lin Feng." His words echoed through the restaurant and the entire atmosphere became deathly silent. To Lin Feng's side, the young man's eyes started to sparkle. How charismatic! He wouldn't have thought that Lin Feng, the hero he worshipped and adored, would be here. To Lin Feng's side, the young man's eyes started to sparkle. How charismatic! He wouldn't have thought that Lin Feng, the hero he worshipped and adored, would be here. "I'm sorry, I have made a mistake," said the man who had been humiliating Lin Feng. His lips were shaking. His facial expression was completely rigid. He only dared criticize Lin Feng behind his back, but in front of Lin Feng, who was the subject of so many bloody rumors, he didn't dare act aggressively anymore. At that moment, his face was so pale that he looked like a ghost. "Sorry." Lin Feng had an evil smile on his mouth. That person had humiliated Lin Feng by saying that Lin Feng didn't deserve to be with such beautiful women. Then he insulted him and threatened him, but thought that saying sorry would be solve the problem? Your mouth is completely rotten, said Lin Feng. Immediately, he raised his hand and immediately bombarded the atmosphere with a punch. Boom! The crowd was gasping in astonishment. That person's body was blown away and heavily crashed onto the floor. Blood was gushing out of his mouth and his teeth were even unceasingly falling onto the floor. That person violently coughed twice. His eyes were filled with hatred. After that, he lowered his head. He didn't dare look at Lin Feng. Such a worthless person. You dare act that arrogantly, how miserable, said Lin Feng, sounding cold while humiliating the man. Immediately after, he turned to the young man, slightly smiled and nodded, which made the young man's eyes fill with excitement. Lin Feng walked to the banister of the balcony and continued to look down at the crowd. The atmosphere was bustling with noise and excitement. In Xueyu, wedding ceremonies were very particular. People who had no influence could immediately become husband and wife. They didn't even need to organize a ceremony. There were some cultivators who did it that way as well, but, of course, people who had strength and influence wanted their wedding ceremonies to be spectacular and grandiose, to show how majestic they were. This time, the genius young cultivator of the holy courtyard of Xueyu, Wen Renyan, was going to get married with Duan Yu, who part of the imperial family and possessed the blood spirit. Obviously, their wedding ceremony had to be spectacular. They were noble cultivators. High-ranking officials, princes and marquises would all come to congratulate them. Of course, there would be a lot of people of the holy courtyard of Xueyu who would come as well. It was said that at that moment, the vast army had already encircled the imperial city. Everybody was arriving outside of the city. Concerning the inside of the imperial city, Duan Lai's family also wanted to make it a spectacular event and make it the talk of the city. In a few months that wouldn't be possible. Duan Yu, Wen Renyan. Lin Feng remembered the first time he had met them both. Duan Yu attempted to make him slap his own face when he first went to the Celestial Academy, and Wen Renyan was constantly trying to make a show of his strength in the Yunhai sect. He had repeatedly tried to kill Lin Feng in order to try and prove how strong and majestic he was. Lin Feng had a smile on the corner of his mouth. In the past, in his heart, he was swearing that when Ren Yan had to die, no matter where he was, no matter what, he would kill him. Lin Feng didn't have the same feeling anymore. All he was concerned with was getting stronger. If he managed to become extremely strong and reach the peak of the Xianqi layer, people like Wen Renyan would be unimportant and he could kill them anywhere. Even at the entrance of the holy courtyard of Xueyu. Back in the past, Duan Tianlang had annihilated the Yunhai sect, and when Ren Yan joined the holy courtyard of Xueyu. Let's go, said Lin Feng in a low voice. His body flickered and he landed in the middle of the crowd outside. Meng Qing and Lan Jiao were closely following him, and also landed in the sea of people. When the crowd saw Lin Feng and his friends leave, the silence was broken and the atmosphere became lively again. He had not been seen for half a year and now, he had come back. After Lin Feng had been given the title of Marquis, he had gone back to Yangzhou City and now, he had returned to the imperial city. This would definitely increase the excitement among the population. Besides, in the imperial city these days, many unknown or hidden geniuses were making themselves known. They were all particularly outstanding young cultivators. It suddenly seemed like Xueyu was witnessing the rise of many geniuses. They were also all wondering what kind of spectacle Lin Feng would create this time. After Lin Feng left the restaurant, a silhouette slowly appeared. That person looked calm and peaceful, just like a pure lotus flower. That was the owner of the restaurant, Qing Xian. When she saw these three people leave, her eyes revealed relief. She had a strange facial expression. She remembered the last time Lin Feng had come to her restaurant. She remembered that she had found him immature, but he was only a little boy of the Lingqi layer. However, these days she could feel that there was something profound, unfathomable and enigmatic about Lin Feng. She only felt admiration for him when she saw him now. It was also a huge relief that they hadn't destroyed her restaurant again. Outside of the imperial city there was a huge palace. It covered a vast area. It was the most imposing palace outside of the imperial city. It belonged to the noble, Duan Lai, who possessed the blood spirit of the imperial clan. Being a member of the Duan clan, his palace obviously had to be majestic and grandiose. At that moment in the garden of the palace, a A huge stage was erected. On that stage there were many people. There were some old men, who belonged to the palace, as well as some wealthy and noble people who had extremely high social statuses. Apart from these people on the stage there were also many young people. They all looked full of vigor and vitality. Considering they were young, they were all gifted cultivators and were all students of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. They were all Wen Renyan's friends. They hoped that they would be able to do the same as Wen Renyan, and marry a beautiful woman who had a blood spirit of the imperial clan. After all, Duanyu had quite high natural talent, coupled with her blood spirit and social status. She was definitely suited to marry Wen Renyan. It was easy to predict that Wen Renyan's reputation would become even more brilliant in the future. He wouldn't stop moving forwards. One day, he would break through the Lingqi layer into the Xianqi layer. He would become a pillar for Shuiyu. Look, Yu Tianshan and Yu Tianxing. They have also come. Besides, the Yu clan and the Yu clan came together. At that moment, in the distance, two handsome silhouettes were coming which made the crowd cry out in alarm. The Yu clan and the Yu clan were symbols of strength and social status. They were extremely arrogant to the extent that Duan Tianlang even had to give them face. Duan Lai even more so. It was possible to say that if the Yu clan and Yu clan came, Duan Lai should really feel honored. Besides, these two people both had the character Tian in their names. How scary were their clans? They all had extraordinary social statuses and were expected to one day reach the Tianqi layer. Yu Tianxing is a disciple of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, and it could be that he is friends with Wen Renyan, but Yu Tianshan, I don't know why he came. It's strange, thought people in the crowd as they had their doubts. At that moment they saw Duan Lai take a large step forward. He wanted to greet the two young men and said, "Young Master Tianshan, young Master Tianxing, please come my palace. Your presence brings light to my humble dwelling." "Don't be so polite, Duan Lai," replied Yu Tianxing while smiling indifferently and continued, "Wen Renyan and I are brothers. Of course I would never miss his wedding. Besides, Tianshan and Wen Renyan are very good friends as well." Wow, Wen Renyan really has given Duan Lai a great deal of prestige, thought the crowd. It seemed like that time when Renyan wasn't making profit, the one making profit was Duan Lai. At that moment, Duan Lai's eyes were twinkling. As expected, he was going to have a fantastic son-in-law. "Come, young nobles, please sit down," said Duan Lai very politely while leading the way. The two young men weren't polite though. They immediately looked at the highest places on the stage. In the entire Shuiyu country, they were respected and revered. They were the overlords of the country. The young men of the Yu clan and the Yu clan had noble blood. Obviously, wherever they were, they expected people to look up at them. They thought that this was obvious. Those pieces of trash haven't made any progress. They are still as arrogant as ever. At that moment, in the audience beneath the stage, Lin Feng said as he looked at those two young nobles. It had been a long time since he had seen them. These two people were still as arrogant as before. They were not strong enough because they didn't train and they just relied on their social status and thought that they were powerful cultivators. If all the juniors of the Yu clan and the Yu clan were like that, their clan would disappear and nobody would talk about them anymore. Of course, the Yu clan and the Yu clan were not as monstrous as the imperial clan, but they were still very powerful. Hypocritical scum. At that moment, not far from Lin Feng, some people had heard what he said. Lin Feng was surprised. He turned around and immediately looked at the people laughing at him. He only saw someone who was looking at him and smiling coldly. That person wasn't far from Lin Feng. That person then joked again. "What do you intend to do? You only dare criticize people behind their back. When confronted, you are so scared that you can't do anything." Well, Lin Feng was a bit surprised. It seemed like Yu Tianshan and Yu Tianxing had their own fans. "Can't I?" said Lin Feng while smiling indifferently. The expression in his eyes was majestic. An extremely sharp sword energy emerged from his eyes and crashed onto these people's bodies, which made their hearts pound. It was so unbearable that it made them start to move backwards. One glance had sufficed to make their hearts pound violently. "Worthless scum," said Lin Feng indifferently while glancing at them. Immediately after, he stopped paying attention to them, which made hideous expressions appear on their faces. They were all feeling humiliated. That small action didn't draw people's attention. Not a single person around Lin Feng paid attention to it. They were all captivated by the people on the stage. That small action didn't draw people's attention. Not a single person around Lin Feng paid attention to it. They were all captivated by the people on the stage. The prodigies of the Yu clan and the Yu clan had come to that place. They were looking at that gathering of heroic cultivators on the stage. Each and every single student of the holy courtyard of Shui Yu looked valiant and heroic. The crowd was silently admiring them. They were all outstanding and handsome young cultivators. They all had high natural talent. The future of Shui Yu was in these people's hands. They were the most outstanding young cultivators of Shui Yu. They would become the future pillars of the country. Of course, the majority thought that way. But there were other people who thought that in Shui Yu, there were even stronger prodigies who were not in the limelight. These really incredible and outstanding geniuses despised such events. Their stage wasn't a wedding stage, their stage was a battlefield, a stage for true glory. There were also a few people who even despised these so-called young geniuses who were on the stage. They despised such people from the bottom of their hearts. For example, Lin Feng despised these kinds of people. The atmosphere was, as before, lively and noisy. People were merrily enjoying themselves. In the distance, on a large road, many silhouettes were gathering and moving towards the palace. These people had advertised the wedding everywhere inside Shui Yu, to let everyone know the fact that a prodigy of the holy courtyard of Shui Yu, Wen Ranyan, was going to marry the little princess Duan Yu, as if the Duan clan wanted everybody to know. Behind these people, there were many people who were following the event. They were all the people who had been tempted to come and watch. They wanted to see the prodigy of the holy courtyard of Shui Yu, Wen Ranyan, marry the little princess Duan Yu. They looked forward to witnessing the event. The atmosphere was particularly lively. All these people had heard that many outstanding students of the holy courtyard of Shui Yu would be there. They had even heard that Yu Tianshan and Yu Tianxing were coming, which made all these people gasp in astonishment. It seemed like coming to watch the ceremony was definitely going to be worth it. They would be able to see such extraordinary people. They were especially excited to see Yu Tianshan and Yu Tianxing. They were extraordinary young cultivators. They looked so proud. As expected, the prodigies of the powerful clans were extraordinary. However, people were happy and enjoying themselves, but the protagonists Wen Ranyan and Duan Yu hadn't shown themselves yet. At that moment on the stage, Duan Lai suddenly stood up and raised his hands, indicating that he wanted the crowd to quiet down. The crowd obeyed and finally stopped talking. They wanted to know what Duan Lai wanted to say. Duan Lai coughed softly and said, "It is an honor for me to see all of you who have come to my palace. Now I would like to tell you a few things. Wen Ranyan used to be the most outstanding disciple of the Yunhai sect. Even though he was very young, the Yunhai sect future was in his hands. He was even being groomed as the next patriarch of the sect. However, the Yunhai sect was annihilated by Duan Tianlang. However, he didn't kill Wen Ranyan because he noticed his incredible talent. At that moment, Wen Ranyan was only 17 years old. He was young and even dared to refuse Duan Tianlang's offer. He wanted to die with the Yunhai sect. In the end, Duan Tianlang's kindness changed Wen Ranyan's decision, and he had accepted to join the holy courtyard of Shui Yu. There, Wen Ranyan became an outstanding student. Besides, with his skills and ability, he was considered as an outstanding genius, respected by everybody. It is not an exaggeration to say that Wen Ranyan's natural talent is extremely high. He is outstanding. All of these are the reasons why I accepted Wen Ranyan as my son-in-law, to marry Duan Yu." Duan Lai sounded extremely proud, and his introduction of Wen Ranyan described a perfect young man. He had extremely high natural talent, was kind and outstanding. He embellished the story that way because Wen Ranyan was going to become his son-in-law, and they would soon share prestige. All sorts of comments and whispers were spreading in the crowd. How strong! He was the most talented disciple of the Yunhai sect. He could have become the patriarch of the Yunhai sect as well. Unfortunately, the Yunhai sect had been destroyed, but no matter where he was always considered as a genius. Duan Tianlang hadn't killed him and actually spared him. Wen Ranyan, as expected, is a real genius. No wonder that he could marry Duan Yu, who has the blood spirit. But there were also some people who had suspicions because they knew that Lin Feng, who hadn't shown up in the imperial city for the last 6 months, also used to be a disciple of the Yunhai sect. Was Wen Renyan really the most talented disciple of the Yunhai sect? A mocking expression appeared in Lin Feng's eyes. Wen Renyan, the most talented disciple? The most ridiculous part was when he had declared that Wen Renyan refused Duan Tianlan, and was portrayed as a kind person. Duan Lai, in order to not lose face, didn't hesitate and describe Wen Renyan as the perfect son-in-law. Not only was he trying to give face to his daughter, but he was also trying to gain some prestige himself. Another ridiculous thing was the number of people who had actually been fooled and believed these ridiculous words. There were many people who were praising Wen Renyan, as if they worshipped him. Alright, I will not talk much more. Let's look at the bride and groom, said Duan Lai while smiling, and immediately after sat down slowly. At that moment, in the palace suddenly appeared a thread of brilliant light. It was extremely beautiful. After a moment, that thread of light turned into a vast and brilliant light which invaded the entire atmosphere. People raised their heads and looked at the sky. They only saw 5 dazzling lights covering the sky. At that moment, under that endless light, something slowly descended. Huh! The crowd was astonished. A something was descending, but it was composed of 2 silhouettes. They only saw a handsome young man who was carrying a beautiful woman in his arms. Their 2 bodies were slowly descending from the sky, and finally, they landed on the stage in a dazzling way. The lights also lost in intensity, which made the faces of the 2 silhouettes distinctly appear before the crowd. A hero and a beauty, what a perfect match, thought many people as if they were worshipping the couple. Wen Renyan looked brilliant and resplendent, like a hero, natural and unrestrained, while Duanyu looked beautiful and precious. They perfectly complemented each other. Lin Feng was also looking at them. He was thinking about Wen Renyan 2 years before. At that moment, Wen Renyan looked more mature. It also seemed like he had become extremely strong, which made him look lofty and proud. Concerning Duanyu, she looked even more beautiful and voluptuous than in the past. She didn't look as childish as before, she looked much more mature. It was rare to find such women. Unfortunately, she hadn't chosen to marry the right person. Lin Feng was there, and because of that, Wen Renyan was definitely going to die. Wen Ren, you heard my words, you should also say a few words to the crowd, said Duan Lai while smiling at Wen Renyan. Wen Renyan slightly nodded, immediately turned to the crowd and said, I, Wen Renyan, practiced cultivation at the Yunhai sect. I became the #1 genius there. It's just like my father-in-law said. I was recognized a genius of the Yunhai sect by everyone, and was preparing to become the patriarch. Unfortunately, life is impermanent and this could only be a dream. The Yunhai sect was exterminated, and as the result of a strange combination of circumstances, I became a student of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu where everybody respects me. I, Wen Renyan, always give my best on the path of cultivation. I am constantly seeking improvement. Besides, now, it is the greatest honor for me to be able to marry Duanyu. I want to marry her, cherish her and never leave her side. No need to talk about all my qualities, my father-in-law already said them. I hope that everything is clear in everybody's eyes. Today, you all witnessed how I will carry Duanyu in my arms. Wen Renyan's words came directly from the bottom of his heart, which made the crowd nod. Wen Renyan was a good choice. He had natural talent and was very modest. He was definitely above average. He was a good match for Duanyu. Alright, shouted Duan Lai, who was seemingly overjoyed. No need to keep talking about how great and talented Wen Renyan is. Both of them will be able to accomplish great things together. Indeed, Wen Renyan is outstanding, he is a genius. His future is filled with endless opportunities. In the crowd, many people were praising Wen Renyan. There weren't many people who had opportunities to meet Wen Renyan. He was definitely amazing. It is the first time in my life that I see such a shameless person. It's so disgusting that it makes me feel nauseous. At the moment when everybody was praising Wen Renyan, a contradicting voice spread in the air, making everybody's voices suddenly lose their intensity. Immediately after, they all stopped talking. Surprisingly, there was somebody who dared humiliate Wen Renyan on the day of his wedding. Besides, at that moment, everybody on the stage had a high social status. There were still people who dared disrespect everyone on stage. People were unceasingly turning their heads looking for the one who had said that. Immediately, the crowd saw a silhouette leave the crowd and then slowly climb onto the stage. That silhouette was wearing a set of white robes. They didn't look magnificent, but they were clean. That person also had long hair, looked delicate, not arrogant yet natural and unrestrained. It seemed like the ground under such a person's feet would crack underneath the unbearable greatness of that person. When the crowd saw Lin Feng on the stage, they were stupefied. When the crowd saw Lin Feng on the stage, they were stupefied. Who's that? How audacious! Surprisingly, someone dared to act aggressively here. Many people in the crowd thought it was Wen Renyan and Duan Yu's wedding. How could Duan Lai tolerate such behavior? Could it be that that person wanted to die? There were also some people who had already seen Lin Feng, so when they saw him, they had a familiar impression. Carefree and unconventional, a person that despised these types of people, but because they were all facing Lin Feng's back, coupled with the fact that he hadn't shown himself in 6 months, many people didn't think that it could be Lin Feng. However, even though the crowd couldn't see him, the ones in front of Lin Feng could see him clearly. Duan Lai, Wen Renyan, Duan Yu, Yu Tianshan, Yu Tianxing and all the others could clearly see Lin Feng, and they all had a strange and familiar impression. That person, whom they bitterly hated, had appeared before them. Wen Renyan was especially upset when he saw Lin Feng, whom he hadn't encountered in such a long time. He even started shaking. Back in the past, he considered himself the most talented disciple of the Yunhai sect, to the extent that he assumed that he would surpass Tu Fu, even Ling Hu and He Shan, but Lin Feng had appeared and humiliated him, destroying his pride. Back then, Lin Feng was still young. People used to call him a piece of trash, but he had defeated Wen Renyan in front of everyone, which gave birth to his legend. His proud brilliance had vanished, so he had chosen to become a traitor and follow Duan Tianlang. He hated Lin Feng from the bottom of his heart because, out of all the strong cultivators of the Yunhai sect, the Yunhai sect had chosen to die for Lin Feng and not him. They had given up their lives to save Lin Feng. That tragic event proved that Lin Feng was seen as precious, so he was still receiving all of the glory in the end. At the time when Lin Feng became a source of hope for the Yunhai sect and people considered Lin Feng a hero, Wen Renyan had already become a traitor. He didn't want people to see him as a traitor, which is why at that moment on the wedding stage, he was describing himself as perfect. In order to protect his vanity, he didn't want to be known as a traitor. Besides, he also didn't want to compete with Lin Feng. He had heard that Lin Feng, 6 months ago, had already broken through to the 7th Ling Qi layer, set a city on fire and had gone into another country to save the princess. Everything about Lin Feng was spectacular and grandiose. Many people were talking about Lin Feng, but when Renyan could only suffer in silence at the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, practicing cultivation until exhaustion, and even there he would constantly hear Lin Feng's extraordinary stories. It seemed like Lin Feng was protected by the gods. If Lin Feng was somewhere, there was no space there for Wen Renyan as well. He made Wen Renyan seem insignificant. That god of war had appeared again. Wen Renyan wasn't the only whose thoughts were moving at the speed of light. Yu Tianshan and Yu Tianxing were also astonished. Lin Feng was appearing before them once again. No need to mention the hatred these two people felt for Lin Feng. Lin Feng had humiliated Yu Tianshan a few times, and had prevented his relationship with Duan Xianyu. In Duan Xianyu's heart, there was only Lin Feng. She wasn't interested in Yu Tianshan at all. What made him extremely angry and ashamed was that he, young master of the Yu clan, couldn't compete with Lin Feng. Yu Tianxing hated Lin Feng even more. He hadn't forgotten that he was beaten by Lin Feng. It was still one of his worst nightmares. A young master of the Yu clan had surprisingly been beaten to a pulp by Lin Feng in front of everybody. How could he ever forgive such a humiliation? Seeing Lin Feng made people's heartbeats accelerate. Besides, the crowd at the bottom of the stage could still only see Lin Feng's back, but they could see the facial expressions of the people on the stage. They had also noticed the terrifying silence. Their eyes started to narrow. Who was that person? That person had surprisingly humiliated Wen Renyan, but nothing was happening as they would have imagined. Nobody was attacking the young man and sending him flying off the stage, The people on the stage were not reacting at all, they all just remained silent. "It's you," said Duan Yu while staring at Lin Feng. She of course knew that handsome young man. When she had wanted to slap Lin Feng had heartlessly slapped her instead. "It's me," said Lin Feng indifferently. He looked at Wen Renyan and said, "Wen Renyan, we haven't seen each other in such a long time. Not only haven't you gotten rid of your arrogance, but you have also become more shameless than ever. What you said today left me truly speechless at your lack of shame." Lin Feng was clearly making fun of Wen Renyan, which progressively made his facial expression become hideous. "Who the hell are you to dare talk in this way? Who do you think Wen Ren is? Since when can an idiot like you can come here and speak like this?" At that moment, someone looking at the stage said while sounding cold and indifferent. That person was one of the students of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. He wasn't weak and had already broken through to the 5th Ling Qi layer. After having joined the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, he had become one of Wen Renyan's friends and had decided to follow him. At that moment, there was suddenly a young man who dared humiliate Wen Renyan. That guy wanted to die. That person even immediately started running towards Lin Feng. His qi was very thick and dense, as if he wanted to punish Lin Feng for his offense. Wen Renyan's eyes flashed, but he said nothing to stop that person. He could use that person to find out Lin Feng's cultivation level. "I want to see what cultivation level that idiot relies on. Daring to insult my brother Wen Renyan," that person shouted, sounding ice cold. Immediately after, his fist started moving towards Lin Feng at full speed. It created a strong wind which rolled through the atmosphere and made Lin Feng's clothes flutter. However, at that moment, a cold and indifferent smile appeared on the corner of Lin Feng's mouth. What a pity, this person would die in such tragic conditions. A powerful sword energy emerged in the atmosphere. It was monstrous. That sword energy covered everything as far as the eye could see. At that moment, Lin Feng seemed like he could pierce anything. The heart of the person who was running towards Lin Feng suddenly twitched. Surprisingly, his attack also stopped moving forwards as he was clearly hesitant. Standing in the middle of that sword energy, he felt like he was a small paper boat on a vast ocean during a storm. He couldn't help but be thrown around by the power of the energy. How terrifying! That person's heart was pounding. He started to retreat and didn't attack Lin Feng. He started to lower his fist. He couldn't provoke a person who had such terrifying sword energy. "Too late," said Lin Feng while smiling coldly. Lin Feng raised his finger and immediately pointed at the cultivator's hand. A horrible shriek spread through the air. He hadn't even had the time to pull his fist back and his hand had already been cut cleanly from the rest of his arm. An expression of agony appeared on his face. Lin Feng's finger had also destroyed the internal blood vessels of the arm. His sword energy was causing heavy damage. His horrible shriek abruptly came to an end because at that moment, Lin Feng's finger was suddenly pressing against his throat. If Lin Feng moved his finger even slightly, that person would lose his life. The cultivator seemed like he had forgotten the pain. He was fixedly staring at Lin Feng and saw that Lin Feng's eyes were filled pity. Lin Feng then said coldly, "You wanted to protect Wen Renyan, but Wen Renyan let you die, how pitiful," said Lin Feng, which made the person surprised. Wen Renyan was letting him die? When he thought about it, his heart started pounding. Indeed, since Lin Feng had come for Wen Renyan, it meant that Wen Renyan knew him but wasn't warning his fellow disciple about Lin Feng's strength. He let Lin Feng attack him to test his strength. When he thought about it, his face turned deathly pale. A sad expression appeared on his face. Indeed, how pitiful. Lin Feng raised his head and looked at Duan Lai in the distance. He then said coldly, "Duan Lai, is that the perfect young man you were talking about? Someone is fighting for Wen Renyan. But Wen Renyan just watches as that person gets killed protecting him. As expected, he is truly rare and outstanding." Lin Feng's words made Duan Lai's lips twitch, and immediately after, Lin Feng turned around and looked at Wen Renyan. He looked like he wanted to burst into laughter. "Wen Renyan, I can see that you have found yourself a shameless father-in-law to match your own shamelessness. You like to shine in front of everybody. I admire you. Praising yourself and changing the truth to make it sound spectacular. Wen Renyan, could it be that the holy courtyard of Shuiyu gives lessons on how to act shameless? Oh, you like telling lies, said Wen Renyan, looking colder and colder. Lies, said Lin Feng while smiling coldly and continued. Wen Renyan, you don't need to talk to me about such things. You are my fellow disciple of the Yunhai sect. Yet you acted as if you didn't know me. You can't have forgotten our fight during the competition of the sect. You let him rush to attack me, you didn't tell him that coming to fight against me would lead to his death. How could he stand a chance at defeating me, Lin Feng? When the crowd heard the name Lin Feng, their hearts started pounding. Lin Feng. That aggressive young man is Lin Feng. No wonder he behaved that way. No wonder that these people remained silent. That is Lin Feng. Lin Feng is back. The crowd gasped with astonishment while looking at that silhouette on the stage. The crowd gasped with astonishment while looking at that silhouette on the stage. Indeed, if that person was really Lin Feng, Wen Renyan should have known that the person who wanted to protect him had no chance of even receiving a single blow. However, Wen Renyan hadn't warned him at all. He remained silent. How virtuous and kind was that? By acting this way in front of such a large crowd, everybody could see that he was not only a bad person, but his behavior could even be described as detestable. Duan Lai and Wen Renyan's lies were collapsing. An ugly expression appeared on the face of the person who had just had an altercation with Lin Feng. His eyes were filled with indignation and anger. Wen Renyan was really shameless. He had unscrupulously let him fight against Lin Feng. Lin Feng, this has nothing to do with me. It's a misunderstanding, said the person who had just attacked Lin Feng. Lin Feng glanced at that person indifferently and smiled coldly. Nothing to do with you? How amusing. If I had been weaker than you, wouldn't I have died because of your misunderstanding? Joked Lin Feng. Then, he said coldly, when you take action, you have to consider the consequences. When Lin Feng finished talking, Sword Chi immediately shot into his interlocutor's throat. The crowd was astonished. He died. Lin Feng had killed him without showing even a shred of mercy. That person's eyes, even though he had just died, were still wide open as if he would never have peace even in death. Lin Feng's eyes looked to the side. He looked perfectly calm and serene. Had it been a misunderstanding? In that cruel and merciless world, could there be so many misunderstandings? In that world, if a person was weak, a misunderstanding could lead to death. No matter if there was a misunderstanding or not, the other person wouldn't care. Besides, he was planning to murder someone to flatter Wen Renyan. When killing these types of people, Lin Feng didn't need to show mercy. Lin Feng turned to Wen Renyan and mockingly smiled. Most gifted disciple of the Yunhai sect? Said Lin Feng. Even though he wasn't talking extremely loud, people could clearly hear what he was saying. When Wen Renyan heard Lin Feng, he suddenly looked troubled. A moment before, Duan Lai had said that Wen Renyan was the most gifted disciple of the Yunhai sect, and that it was already unofficially planned to make him the new patriarch. After that, Wen Renyan had confirmed that Duan Lai's words were true. However, at that moment Lin Feng, who was also a disciple of the Yunhai sect, was in front of him. Who was the most gifted disciple of the Yunhai sect? You are the most gifted disciple of the Yunhai sect. I am also a disciple of the Yunhai sect. Could you teach me some things? What do you think? Said Lin Feng when he saw that Wen Renyan remained silent. Lin Feng sounded cold and detached. Lin Feng's words were making Wen Renyan even more annoyed. Besides, the crowd at the bottom of the stage, people all had strange facial expressions. Was Wen Renyan really the most gifted disciple of the Yunhai sect? At that moment, Lin Feng was challenging him to a battle. Lin Feng, let's forget about our past conflicts for the time being and settle this matter later. Today is the day of my wedding, could you please just leave? Said Wen Renyan in a low voice yet sounding cold. Lin Feng had appeared and was ruining everything. Besides, he was making him endlessly lose face. Leave, said Lin Feng sounding amused. He then continued, you are the most gifted disciple of the Yunhai sect. You are going to become the patriarch. You are extremely kind and have high natural talent. You are perfect. I, Lin Feng, am a disciple of the Yunhai sect. I used to be and still am a disciple of the Yunhai sect. I am not like you, Wen Renyan, back in the past when Duan Tianlang attacked the Yunhai sect, Who was the first one to betray the Yunhai sect? When Ren Yin remained silent, his facial expression looked glum. When Ren Yin, you betrayed your own teacher without a second thought. You are a traitor, but today you say, in front of everybody, that you were the most outstanding disciple of the Yunhai sect and that you are perfect. Are you not doing this because you think that, because the Yunhai sect has been annihilated, nobody will be able to expose all of your lies? That's enough, shouted Wen Runyin furiously. Lin Feng, you are really shameless to dare spout these provocations. Shut the hell up, said Lin Feng when he heard that Wen Runyin actually dared shout furiously at him. He then took a step forwards and released a deadly chi which made Wen Runyan's face turn deathly pale. He was rushing backwards as fast as he could. His facial expression was hideous. A piece of trash pretending to be a genius. And besides that, he dares to provoke me. Wen Renyan, do you still have any face? Lin Feng stopped smiling and said, Wen Renyan, you are a shameless traitor, and on top of that, you dare talk to me in such an insolent way. That's enough, said Duan Lai while standing up. He then looked at Lin Feng in a cold and detached way and said, Lin Feng, get lost. You shut the fuck up, shouted Lin Feng furiously. Get lost? How ridiculous. A moment ago, were you not making up lies about the groom? Weren't you saying that he used to be the most talented disciple of the Yunhai sect? Weren't you saying that he was perfect? Now what are you afraid of? Why are you so impatient to see me leave? What do you want precisely? Asked Duan Lai, whose face was filled with killing intent. Lin Feng was detestable. Duan Lai just wanted to kill Lin Feng on the spot. It was his daughter's wedding and Lin Feng dared ruin it. What do I want? Said Lin Feng, smiling again. He then said indifferently, Duan Lai, even though there has been some tensions between Duan Yu and me in the past, I already slapped her for her mistake, but you didn't send any armed forces to chase me. I, Lin Feng, do not intend at all to provoke you and Duan Yu. Unfortunately, you chose Wen Renyan to become your daughter's husband, but today I have come to settle accounts with him. However you decide to act, think carefully before you make your choice. The crowd was slightly shaking. Lin Feng was threatening Duan Lai. They perfectly understood what Lin Feng meant. He had come to settle accounts with Wen Renyan. He could ignore Duan Lai, but if he decided to get involved, he would need to think carefully about the consequences. Lin Feng was threatening Duan Lai, an aristocrat related to the imperial family. Duan Lai, of course, perfectly understood that Lin Feng was threatening him. His facial expression was extremely ugly. That bastard. This day was the day of his daughter's wedding. A myriad of wealthy and noble cultivators had gathered there, to the extent that some people of the Yu clan and the Yu clan had come. In such circumstances, Lin Feng dared threaten him. Lin Feng was standing tall with his head held high. He was alone on the stage facing a myriad of extremely strong cultivators. Lin Feng looked insufferably confident. He was acting as if these people were nobodies. Duan Lai wasn't the only one who looked furious. Each and every single wealthy and noble person was smiling coldly, especially the young men full of youth. A few students of the holy courtyard of Shui, you had seen Lin Feng kill one of their fellow disciples. He was extremely aggressive and kept humiliating them, which made them all bitterly hate Lin Feng. Besides, Yu Tianchan and Yu Tianxing were also glaring at Lin Feng. Their eyes were filled with fury. That guy was monstrously aggressive. Lin Feng, even though you have become a marquis, here, there are many other people who have a higher social status than you. Duan Lai has the blood of the imperial family. Could it be that you think that, because you are a marquis, you can defy the divine and human laws? Said Yu Tianxing, who couldn't help but open his mouth and make fun of Lin Feng. His eyes were filled with hatred. He hadn't forgotten the previous humiliation. It was haunting him in his worst nightmares. Lin Feng raised his head and indifferently glanced at Yu Tianxing. Lin Feng looked calm and serene, and suddenly he started smiling as if he wanted to make a joke again. Alright, what about you? What do you plan to do about it? Said Lin Feng indifferently, which stupefied Yu Tianxing. Lin Feng was insufferable. So what? What did Yu Tianxing want to do to stop him? Extremely arrogant, pure arrogance. Lin Feng didn't need to give these people face. All of them were his enemies. They all hated and despised him, so what? Things would go according to Lin Feng's plans. At the bottom of the stage, the crowd was gasping in astonishment. Their chests were suddenly being invaded with excitement. They were trying to imagine what it was like to be Lin Feng, looking at all of these extremely arrogant, wealthy and noble cultivators and humiliating them, talking down to them. They wanted to have the feeling of asking someone, "What do you plan to do about it?" As expected, when Yu Tianxing heard Lin Feng, he immediately looked extremely glum and hideous. His lips kept trembling with anger, but no words were coming out of his mouth. That bastard! What an abominable bastard! He didn't know how to answer to Lin Feng. He couldn't compete with Lin Feng, so what could he do? He could only remember the hatred he felt for Lin Feng. It was deeply engraved in his heart. You're just trash. Apart from the fact that you belong to a prestigious clan, you are nothing. You are worthless, said Lin Feng. He didn't seem ready to let Yu Tianxing off. Lin Feng sounded cold and detached as he was making Yu Tianxing, whose expression became uglier and uglier. Lin Feng thought that Yu Tianxing was worthless and that apart from the influence of his clan, he was just a nobody. That was an absolute humiliation. All these noble and wealthy cultivators, who belonged to the biggest clans, were fixedly and furiously staring at Lin Feng, but Lin Feng didn't care. Since he had come to that place, he was ready to face all of them. Lin Feng was mockingly looking at that bunch of arrogant cultivators. He then said a few words sounding indifferent. If any of you don't agree with me, you can be the first to stand up and try to stop me. The one who wins can keep on living while the loser dies. If you don't have the courage to fight, then stay there while blankly gazing into the distance and don't act recklessly. Lin Feng alone was provoking everybody else. Silence invaded the atmosphere of the palace. Silence invaded the atmosphere of the palace. Everybody was fixedly staring at Lin Feng, that carefree young man. Lin Feng's arrogant and despising words were still resonating in their minds. As expected, Lin Feng was exactly like in the rumors. He considered them beneath his notice. The faces in crowd at the bottom of the stage all looked hideous without exception. Lin Feng was provoking and humiliating everyone there. Nobody dared say anything though. Who would be willing to participate in a battle to the death? Some months before, the rumors said that Lin Feng had already broken through to the 8th Ling Qi layer, and that his pride knew no limits. At that moment, Lin Feng could scare them with only one glance. He could scare Wen Renyan with only a bit of his strength and force. Lin Feng was terrifying. Nobody dared fight against him. No one wanted to fight him because Lin Feng was daring enough to kill Duan Han in front of his father Duan Tianlang. Since Lin Feng had done that, he probably wouldn't hesitate to kill anyone there. All they could do was try to use influence to persuade Lin Feng. Lin Feng, do you know what kind of people you are talking about? Said Duan Lai, sounding ice cold. He hadn't thought that Lin Feng would be that aggressive. No need for you to teach me anything. I have already said it. If you disagree with me, you can come and fight. If you want, you can all come together. Said Lin Feng, sounding cold and detached, which made Duan Lai's chi surge to the skies. Nobody could scare Lin Feng away. Nobody could put pressure on him. He was truly a madman. The whole scene was amusing though. Duan Lai belonged to the imperial family. There was also many geniuses of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu there as well. There were also a myriad of noble and wealthy cultivators, to the extent that the Yu clan and Yu clan, terrifyingly powerful clans, were present as well. They had a lot of influence and usually nobody dared to provoke them. But they were facing Lin Feng, that extremely aggressive young man, known for his insane actions. Lin Feng wasn't scared of anyone and would dare to offend anyone, no matter their status. He was insane, but he was also much stronger than all these outstanding young cultivators on the stage. Besides, the second prince regarded Lin Feng as very important. What could they do under such conditions? What do you really want? Asked Duan Lai. His face looked glum. What do I want? Lin Feng smiled and looked at Wen Renyan. Wen Renyan, back in the days you thought that you were the best compared to everyone else. Because we did not agree with you, you tried to kill me and my friends. How arrogant is that? After that, at the life and death arena, when the Yunhai sect still regarded you as a genius, you tried to kill me. But unfortunately, it was a crushing defeat for you. You then betrayed the sect and revealed that you are extremely shameless. You surprisingly dare to stand here and speak such garbage, bragging about the fact that you were the most talented disciple of the Yunhai sect and that you are perfect. You already have no sense of integrity anymore. Today I came here. What do you think I, Lin Feng, want to do? Lin Feng's words made Wen Renyan's heart twitch. He was looking at Lin Feng with killing intent on his face. His face was filled with coldness. Lin Feng wanted to kill him. Indeed, Lin Feng definitely wanted to kill him. Back then, when they were still at the Yunhai sect, when Ren Yan bitterly hated Lin Feng, from the bottom of his heart. He wanted to kill Lin Feng and Lin Feng wanted to kill him. In other words, if they ever had the opportunity, they would use it. When Ren Yan just couldn't believe that Lin Feng would dare come to the wedding of Duan Lai's daughter to kill a genius of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. Was Lin Feng truly fearless? When Ren Yan didn't understand Lin Feng. In Lin Feng's vocabulary, the word fear just didn't exist at all. At that moment, how could the crowd at the bottom of the stage not understand Lin Feng? All the compliments they had just heard about Wen Ren Yan turned out to be lies. He was afraid of Lin Feng. When facing Lin Feng, he didn't dare open his dirty mouth. What a crappy genius. He was supposed to be the outstanding and kind-hearted prodigy of the Yunhai sect, with high natural talent. All of those were pathetic lies. They had even thought that Wen Ren Yan could possibly rival Lin Feng. A moment before, Duan Lai's introduction of Wen Ren Yan, and Wen Ren Yan's self-introduction had been way too exaggerated. The crowd had thought that he was monstrously strong, that he was a real genius. After Lin Feng had stepped onto the stage, Duan Lai and Wen Ren Yan had transformed into two different people. Lin Feng was exposing the truth. In front of Lin Feng, Wen Ren Yan was a nobody. Wen Ren Yan could see that Lin Feng was fearless and that he, Wen Ren Yan, was a bit weak. For the most talented disciple of the Yunhai sect, he wasn't courageous at all. In front of Lin Feng, Wen Ren Yan was tiny and insignificant. That day was Wen Ren Yan's wedding day, but Lin Feng had appeared and the stage had become Lin Feng's stage. Lin Feng had become the protagonist. Lin Feng turned his head and looked at Duan Yu. He then said, sounding cold and detached, "Get lost." Duan Yu's face turned deathly pale. She almost started to have convulsions. Lin Feng was looking at her and telling her to get lost. That day was supposed to be one of the most important days of her life. Everybody was supposed to pay attention to her and be happy for her, but Lin Feng was there, ignoring her boyfriend and insulting her. Her boyfriend could only remain silent in spite of the incessant humiliations. Duan Yu was nibbling her lips. Her pale face kept trembling. She then said, sounding cold and detached, "Don't get too arrogant, Lin Feng. I told you to get lost," said Lin Feng while taking a big step and releasing a monstrous amount of deadly qi which bombarded the atmosphere. It was whistling in the atmosphere and created a hurricane which was blowing against Duan Yu's body. Seer! 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 Duan Yu's feet were sliding backwards under the pressure of that deadly qi. She had no choice but to move backwards. Otherwise, it seemed that Lin Feng would really kill her. "Lin Feng, you're way too arrogant," shouted Duan Lai furiously. He then rushed through the air while releasing an incredible quantity of deadly qi which enveloped Lin Feng's body. Duan Lai was no longer able to contain himself. When Lin Feng saw that silhouette rushing through the air, he smiled, looking cold and detached. He released sword qi which immediately invaded the atmosphere. He jumped into the air and in a flash his fist pierced through the air like a sword. Lin Feng was using his hand as a sword. It was even diffusing a dazzling sword glow. The light of the sword was piercing everything. In a flash, Duan Lai gave a horrible shriek and stopped moving forwards. Instead, he was madly retreating and was firmly covering his forearm with the other hand. Blood was flowing through his hand as the wound was clearly deep. Lin Feng was in the air. He looked swift and fierce. He had nearly cut off Duan Lai's arm, and if Duan Lai was any slower, he would have died. How strong! Thought the people in the crowd whose hearts were pounding. Lin Feng was extremely strong. He was arrogant and proud. He could reach the heavens because of his incredible strength. Duan Lai surprisingly couldn't fight against Lin Feng. A moment before, if Duan Lai hadn't dodged the attack, he would lost his life. "Next time, I will show no mercy and cut your arm off," said Lin Feng coldly while descending from the sky. The crowd was astonished. If Duanlai still had his arm, it wasn't because he had dodged the attack in time, it was because Lin Feng had let him keep it. Lin Feng wasn't afraid of fighting or killing. For a while, nobody would dare to move against him again. Unless there was a cultivator of the Xianqi layer, who would dare fight against Lin Feng? Unfortunately, Duanlai was also a noble and had the blood of the imperial family, but he was just a collateral relative. He wasn't as powerful as Duan Tianlang, neither in terms of strength nor in terms of social status. Even though his palace was gigantic, it was outside the imperial city. Besides, there wasn't a single cultivator of the Xianqi layer there. A cultivator of the Xianqi layer wouldn't follow Duanlai to protect him. They would only follow stronger nobles of the imperial city. In the vast palace, there was only a fearless young man, and what was happening before their eyes was absolutely insane. Lin Feng didn't care about what the crowd thought. He looked at Wen Renyan while releasing a deadly qi and said, sounding cold and detached, "Today, I stand here on behalf of the Yunhai sect. You will be punished as a traitor, Wen Renyan. Wen Renyan, you will die today," added Lin Feng. The crowd was astonished. Lin Feng wanted to kill Wen Renyan. Wen Renyan was going to die. Wen Renyan's facial muscles were twitching. Immediately after, he smiled coldly and said, "Stand on behalf of the Yunhai sect and kill a traitor? Ridiculous. What gives you the right to represent the Yunhai sect?" "What gives me the right?" Lin Feng laughed. He raised his hand and showed a ring on his index. It was dazzling. When Wen Renyan saw the ring, it seemed like his heart had stopped. "Before Nangong Ling, the patriarch, went to his final battle, he gave me that ring. I have been the patriarch of the Yunhai sect for a long time already. Even though it was annihilated, there is still one last person left, me. As before, the Yunhai sect still has a patriarch, me, Lin Feng." Lin Feng was speaking slowly. He looked at Wen Renyan and continued, "Wen Renyan, what do you think? Do I have the right to kill a traitor like you? A traitor who betrayed the Yunhai sect?" The crowd was blankly staring at Lin Feng. Surprisingly, Lin Feng was the patriarch of the Yunhai sect. Ridiculous. Duanlai and Wen Renyan had surprisingly declared that Wen Renyan was unofficially already proclaimed as the new patriarch of the Yunhai sect. Lin Feng was actually the patriarch. The actual patriarch had been Lin Feng all the way. The Yunhai sect hadn't been annihilated, because there was still a patriarch. It could even be said that Lin Feng's hatred for Duan Tianlang was as deep as the oceans. Could it be that? Wen Renyan was shaking. Could it be that the fate of the Yunhai sect was still in Lin Feng's hands? So that's how it was. The Yunhai sect had so much faith in Lin Feng that they made him the patriarch. Wen Renyan was ridiculous, an insignificant yet fairly strong disciple, nothing more. Alright, enough bullshit, we have already talked too much. Now I, Lin Feng, the patriarch of the Yunhai sect, will kill the traitor of the Yunhai sect," said Lin Feng, sounding cold and detached. He released a monstrous amount of deadly qi and he then raised his hand. His body was enveloped by a tornado of deadly qi. "Would you dare? Stop!" Duanlai and Duan Yu shouted at the same time, which made people stare on wide-eyed. However, the person whose heart was shaking the most was Wen Renyan. Lin Feng really wanted to kill him and nobody was going to stop him. No one wanted to offend Lin Feng on his behalf. He could sense the deadly cold pierce through to his bones. His heart was filled with coldness and he was shaking with fear. Die! The deadly qi invaded the entire and rose to the skies. Nobody could change Lin Feng's mind. Nobody could prevent Lin Feng from killing Wen Renyan. His terrifying sword light fell through the sky like a shooting star. It was so dazzling that the crowd didn't dare directly look into the light. Everybody was holding their breath and blankly staring at the sword light, which was falling through the sky straight towards Wen Renyan. While the sword light was descending from the sky, the crowd remained silent. There was not a single sound that broke the silence. Then a red mark appeared on Wen Renyan's body. It started at the top of his head. Then the red line expanded down between his eyebrows. Then the red line continued down the middle of his nose, and it gradually continued down his body until it was cleanly divided into two parts. That red mark was the blood from the wound, and Wen Renyan was cut in half. Wen Renyan's eyes were wide open. His skin had lost all its vitality. Immediately after, His body slowly collapsed backwards and landed in separate places. When Ren Yin had just died, Lin Feng had killed him. Everything seemed too far-fetched to be reality. It was when Ren Yin and Duan Yu's wedding day. Duan Lai had prepared a spectacular ceremony and had managed to make many people come, but the crowd ended up not seeing a wedding ceremony. Instead, they saw the groom, when Ren Yin being cut into two halves. In front of everybody and on the day of Duan Yu, and when Ren Yan's wedding, Lin Feng had killed Wen Ren Yan. He had humiliated Duan Lai's family as well as the other influential people on the stage. You're tuning into the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.